good for you. Come on. We'll think of another place. Come with me. Let's have a smoke break. Nah, not just a normal break. It's smoke break. Smoke break. Smoke break.
30 seconds and counting.
There were plenty of years where there were guys who would dread being drafted by the Buffalo Bills. Not anymore.
Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds.
Brandon Beane realizes they're in a window of 2 to 3 years max to get this done while the iron's still hot. And getting Von Miller into that situation was big for the Bills.
10, 9.
Oh, baby.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Great interview, guys.
You want to be a Buffalo Bill, Diggs? What do you think? You want to stay a Buffalo Bill? You want to stay a Buffalo Bill? No. No, you had enough. Are you going to the Texans? Yep. Yep. Does this shock everybody in sports media and the entire world? Yep. Did you make all of us look like absolute idiots for defending you the entire step of the way? Yep. Sure did. Did I say there was a 0% chance you were going absolutely anywhere? Yep. I sure did. Did I work all night last night? Sleep till 1 o'clock today? Like a baby, having no idea what was going on in the world of Bills Twitter, in the world of the Buffalo Bills, in the world of the NFL, in the world of all of this bullshit? Yep, you sure bet I did. Am I live right now on the smoke break with you lovely people to talk about Stefon Diggs being traded to the Houston Texans? Is that real life, folks? Is that reality? Yep. Yep, it sure is. As he nods his head. Yep. Yep, it sure is, folks. Welcome in. Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel on a Wednesday afternoon. Are you absolutely mother effing kidding me? Oh, we're powered by BetUS, where the game begins. Receive a 125% sign-up bonus in the link in the description below using the promo code JOIN125. I don't know, man. I worked all night last night, so I had a late night, slept late because of it, woke up to 10 missed calls, 100 missed texts, 100 tweets, 100 this, 100 that. Bills must have moved up into the draft to go draft a wide receiver too, right? That's got to be the reason everybody's calling me. That's got to be the reason everybody's oh, there's the graphic from Schefter, right? There's the tweets, and our guy, Stefon Diggs, wide receiver 1, is gone. There goes the bobblehead. There goes the numerous amounts of action figures, the jerseys somewhere. That'll never get worn again. I am at a loss for words, folks. Been defending Stefon Diggs all offseason, tweet after tweet, media tour after media tour, debate after debate on the morning show programs about Stefon Diggs' future in Buffalo, and we all sat around. He's not going anywhere. If you looked at the contract, he's just trolling with Bills Mafia. One click of a button on Twitter gets everybody riled up. He probably gets a kick out of it. He's just messing around with everybody, right? He doesn't want to go anywhere. He's told us multiple times where he wants to be, when he's pressed on where he wants to be, when he's pressed on what his current situation is, when he's asked if he wants to be in Buffalo. He says he's given that answer before. We go back and we dig into the answers given to us before, and he says he wants to retire as a Buffalo Bill. He wants to be a Buffalo Bill. Folks, we have been bamboozled in Buffalo. The Buffalo bamboozlement. However, if that's even a word, this is what has occurred, folks. This is what has occurred. Let's bring in Dan Mitchell. Dan, buddy, talk to me. You were up for it. I'm sorry I missed your call. Like I said, I was passed out. I get a missed call. I got all these missed calls. I wake up. Of course, the one night I choose to work through the night, I wake up to an utter hellstorm. You were up for it.
Yeah.
Initial reaction. I mean, walk me through it because I'm still coming to terms with what's going on today.
So I'll be completely honest with you. I had to check the calendar, and I thought that today was April 1st, right? Because we saw all those images of Stefon Diggs. He's traded over to the Dallas Cowboys for a while. And it definitely gave me a double take, man. I was just live not too long ago for about an hour and a half, and I went through like a roller coaster of emotions. At first, I have been on the hill where when you look at his overall production, once Joe Brady ended up taking over, it just wasn't there by itself. This Bills offense has proven that they can succeed with some of our younger players, Kincaid, James Cook, Shakir, etc. So I was like, okay, this is really not that bad of a move. I still think like we're completely fine. But then I ended up seeing the compensation in which of what we got in return. A second rounder, but not this year, but in 2025. And then we also ended up sending over a fifth and a sixth. So I'm hoping that that means that Houston is going to be taking on at least a little bit of that contract that helps us out into the future. But it's wild, man. It's wild. And I was listening to what you were saying prior to coming on. And I also was a Stefon Diggs defender, right? I thought that people...
I think we all were. Did you know anybody that wasn't? I mean,
No.
Seriously.
I mean, really outside of a handful of people, like, I mean, Stephen A., for example, and it sucks because now...
Within the Bills community, did you find anybody that was saying, get him out of here, or anybody that was saying this is actually going to happen? I couldn't find you one. Not one.
No, not at all. But, Z, this is what that trade package has confirmed. Where there is smoke, there is fire.
Yeah.
And I am dead set on this. He must have been the most toxic of cancers you have ever seen in an organization of football, because you can't tell me that it literally appears like Brandon Beane took the first offer and Houston was probably just shocked. They're like, oh shit, we thought that you were going to come back with at least a counter on that. Like, he had to be such a problem either in the locker room or either with the coaching staff, with Josh Allen, with the front office, that we allowed him to walk away. So is it addition by subtraction? We don't know, but I think that tells us quite a bit about how he has been within this organization for the past couple of years.
I think what you just brought up makes a whole hell of a lot of sense. One, you're trading him to maybe the most promising young team in the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
When you say it seems like a phone call in the night, pick up, hey, this is what we have, your thoughts. Yes, let's do it. I mean, we're going to have to find out what, maybe it'll come out, maybe it won't, the amount of offers that were given throughout the offseason, the amount of conversations Brandon Beane had, if he had any more than this singular conversation. Did he talk to Josh Allen? Was Josh Allen involved with this? What was the exit like for Stefon Diggs? What was the conversation like on the way out? But you now look at the Houston Texans, who went last year from being a team that many people thought might not even sniff the playoffs to winning the division, winning a playoff game, and now with C.J. Stroud, they add Joe Mixon. They have a variety of incredible young talent on that team. It doesn't make any sense. The Bills play the Houston Texans this year. That team is going to be good for a long, long time. A first-year head coach last year, a first-year quarterback, and they looked that good with the amount of young wide receiver talent they have, right? Evan Singletary had a great year for him last year. This is absolutely stunning. This is a stunner beyond stunners, especially because you looked at the contract situation for Stefon Diggs, and that was the ultimate branch you held on to if there were all the other ones falling around you. It was, well, maybe Diggs is tweeting this, maybe he said this, right? But the branch that you had clinging to on that ever so flimsy tree was, look at his contract. There's just no way the Bills are going to be able to move on from him. There's no way anybody's going to want to take that money on. This is what we learned today. We can no longer be naive to any of this shit. When
No.
we on Bill's Twitter want to say, oh, would you stop harping on, and mind you, I'm mimicking myself right now, by the way, because I carried his water for months, Dan, right? But let's say the next time this happens, we no longer can go on Twitter and say, he's just having a grand old time on Twitter. He's just trolling with us, gang. No worries. He's just having a good old time on Twitter with his buddies, making us clench onto our ass cheeks in the offseason because he's bored. We no longer can look at stuff like this because he gave us the paper trail. He left us the crumbs the whole way up until today. We denied all of it. And sure as shit, when it comes to the explosion in which we are watching unfold today, we're acting as though we're shocked. Maybe we shouldn't be shocked. Frankly, probably should not be shocked at all. We should have saw it coming, but we didn't. And here it is.
Now, here's the thing. What today also proves is that literally everything is on the table. Everything is on the table. And that is including, making a damn trade for T. Higgins, making a trade for Brandon Ayuk, trading up into the top 5. Because, folks, if we have learned anything, it's that Brandon Beane is obviously rolling the dice. I have never questioned this man once in my life because anytime that I did, he turns around a day or two later and he does something absolutely spectacular, mind-blowing going into it. But I've been really trying to rack my brain about what I think the Buffalo Bills are trying to do. I think you can essentially just etch it in stone right now that wide receiver is a first-round talent. I think you could probably almost even write under that in Sharpie that we might double dip at wide receiver first and second round going into the draft after this, because there's no way that this was his plan. Beane doesn't come off to me as somebody that's willing to go through a traditional rebuild around the area of just blowing the whole shit up, taking a year off, and then hopefully next year we can just be big spenders in free agency. I'm not sure what you're thinking this team's going with, but I don't know.
Within a month, you've lost wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. They're gone. I know I look at it as not a rebuild either. At least I thought. You can't tell me this isn't a rebuild in the wide receiver locker room. This is an entirety of a rebuild. This is the definition of a rebuild. I know Curtis Samuel comes in, right? I know Matt Collins comes in. No, sorry, folks. That ain't going to be what's trotting out there in the prime of Josh Allen's career when you're multiple seasons away from a play away separating you from being God knows where at this point. Who knows where the Bills would be if a play or two goes a different direction for them against the Chiefs. Yet here they stand now losing their top 2 wide receivers on paper, at least. When I say paper, I mean, of course, with Gabe Davis, we never towards the end really felt as though he was going to be solidified as the wide receiver 2 long term. But as of last year, he was the wide receiver 2. And of course, Stefon Diggs was the wide receiver 1. Both those guys are now gone. Curtis Samuel now finds himself as the best wide receiver on the team, along with third-year Khalil Shakir. I mean, that is what's going on here. That is the reality here. And when you look at where he was sent to for what he was sent for, the Bills get a second-round pick along with a sixth-rounder, right? And a fifth-round pick as well here. He must have either been demanding a trade, demanding it. Like in the room, there was no concessions on his end. Either he was demanding it, or maybe they came to a mutual agreement. I don't know if we're ever going to find out, Dan. This is where I sit right now. I am dying to know how this came to where it came to, because it's insane to me.
And so did you see the Joe Mixon tweet?
Yes. So he made it seem like he requested out, right? Yes. Yeah. Now, you look at, and how ironic that this comes after probably the worst of his tweets out of all this shit that's been happening. And man, I got to tell you, Dan, I feel like an absolute fool today. I feel like a fool. I feel like a bitch. I feel like an idiot, because every time he did something, I took the road. Maybe I went against my better judgment, because you know what, Dan? All of these players in the league, the amount of players that there are, we do see tweets every now and then. We see this and that, but we haven't seen anything quite like we've seen from Diggs as of late, where it was never ending. Every couple of months or every month or so, you'd see this, you'd see that, right? And every time I came out and said, stop listening to Stephen A., stop tuning into the morning show and letting them get clicks over this. Nothing's happening, right? Nothing's happening. And then Diggs would go on Kay Adams and she'd say, oh, like he would say, I've already given my answer, or I've already told you where I want to be. You go back to a press conference he had not all that long ago where yes, I want to be here, right? I want to be here. So I have all this information on my end, and even with that, I continuously keep saying he's going to be here. There's no other way to consider it. I never even gave it a second of thought. So the reason I say, as everybody's laughing at me, the reason I say I feel like a bitch about it is because I feel like I just got totally hoodwinked when I shouldn't have. And that's why I feel like such an absolute idiot, because it feels like I just drank the Kool-Aid in which was there's no way this is going to happen. So stop giving it any credence, even though all the ingredients being tossed into the Kool-Aid were all ingredients that led up to this.
Yeah.
That's what makes no sense to me. We denied every plausible, breadcrumb left on the trail leading us here. Everyone.
As well, at the end of the day, I have to look at the Buffalo Bills like a business. If there's some sort of internal controversy, they're going to put out this absolute crazy PR stunt, right? Oh, yeah, everything's fine. Me and Diggs are great, man. We had lunch the other day. Hey, let's make sure that we throw a couple of smiles during practice so we can have a couple of videos go viral on Twitter so everyone can chill out. I think Buffalo did everything that they possibly could have. It's funny you say that because I was asked of whether or not that I thought that Diggs was going to be traded. And I looked at his overall contract. I looked at the dead money that was already paid over to him, and it didn't make sense. But I did think that it was a hell of a lot more of a possibility that this year was going to be where we start the look, or we start the journey of finding our eventual wide receiver 1 replacement.
Yes.
I thought that we were going to get wide receiver 2, and then hopefully he performed enough to where it showed the organization, okay, we're moving on from Diggs. I had Diggs pegged to be traded or us move on from him next offseason.
Next year.
This offseason was an absolute giant curveball to me. But I'll tell you what, man. I called the Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones switcheroo right over from Green Bay and Las Vegas I'd say a lateral move, right? And I know this is going to be a hard pill to swallow. I feel like a lot of Bills Mafia still needs to relax and sit down and just be like, hey, Dan, what are you talking about? He meant so much. We're about to miss the playoffs. We're about to win 7 or 8 games. The way that I look at this offense right now and the way that I saw Joe Brady ran it last year, the second that he took over, this is a lateral move to me. Where our offense stands, and obviously we still need to put out some moves. We still need to bring in some more wide receiver talent. But if Joe Brady has taught us anything, he loves to run the damn ball, loves tight ends, loves slot receivers. And that's exactly what we had to put on our back to make the run that we did last year. I think that we're looking at not only moving on from Stefon Diggs, but we also need to take a look in the mirror and understand how this offensive identity changed after week 7, after he ended up taking it over. I'm convinced that I really don't see us being a worse or a better team with the departure of Stefon Diggs right now. I really don't.
I mean, the silver lining here is Diggs was about as rudimentary of a wide receiver towards the latter half of last year as anybody else could possibly be, and they pretty much won every single game and were a play away from winning a divisional and going to an AFC championship. With that said, however, there is no denying the fact that these Buffalo Bills, as it stands right now, currently have one of the most mediocre to poor wide receiver locker rooms in the NFL. There is absolutely no denying this. The fact, and this is what we have to, my brain is a Denny's Grand Slam right now.
Me too, bro.
Brandon Beane just ate $31 million in dead cap to not have his best wide receiver on the team, with no succession plan currently in place that we know of course. But now we are 22 days? We are 3 weeks away from tomorrow from round 1. There is absolutely no way we cannot sit here and this is what's going to happen now, Dan. We are now going to be immensely disappointed if we don't hear a the Buffalo Bills have made a trade into the top 10 for Bunze or Malik Neighbors, right? That's where we're at now, because if they don't, and I don't see the Bengals saying, hey, here's the keys to T. Higgins. We know we've been bitter rivals for the last half decade, right? Yeah. I don't see that happening. What's it going to be?
I mean, hey, listen, as far as any
$1 million, Dan, in dead cap did not
Dude.
have the guy on the team. What happened?
I mean, dude, listen, I mean, that right there, I mean, with Stefon Diggs, like, I mean, he must have seduced Brandon Beane's wife or something like that because it doesn't make sense. It must have been so bad, like to a point. Oh, yeah. And by the way, that whole he might have been injured after week 7, probably not. He could have been half-assing out there for all we know.
Oh, we got to question everything now. We got to question everything.
Everything
Who knows how long this has been in the play for, Dan?
Everything is completely on the table right now. And as far as free agency, if free agency has proven anything, the whole betrayal of going to a bitter rival has certainly been a trend so far this year. I mean, Saquon Barkley, for example, Calvin Ridley, for example, like, I mean, there's no love lost, but I don't want to do that specifically. I don't want to get a T. Higgins. I don't want to get Brandon Ayuk. I'll tell you what, I'm starting to be okay with the idea of mortgaging the future. I mean, shit, dude. Tell me if you would do this, if you would send over a first this year, a second this year, a first next year, and a second next year to trade up in the 3rd spot and grab Marvin Harrison Jr. or the 4th spot. Would that be something you would sort of entertain? Because me, I do it any day of the week.
Absolutely. I don't think there's a single outcome that would make that look bad in the coming years, just because I don't think you're going to find another talent like that. And this is the way the current draft is stacked up. It's loaded with top-end wide receiver talent. So I have no problem with it.
It's not even that. Does Brian Thomas Jr., does that not sound as good to you anymore now? Because I'm not sure about you, but Diggs being gone, I like Brian Thomas Jr. He was my number 1 target for a receiver in the draft. But now it's like, dude, we just made, like, it's either we trade up into the top 10 and grab Odunze, Neighbors, or trade up into the top 5 and grab Marvin Harrison Jr., or I'm pretty much convinced at this point that Beane's just telling us, hey, we're just going to take a reset year. Maybe we make the playoffs, maybe we don't, but stay tuned because we're about to ball out in free agency next year. But I think that's where it's going to. I'm sorry, but I just, from what I have seen from Brandon Beane since he has been the GM of the Buffalo Bills, there's been a shocking move, but I highly doubt that it's just going to be pain and suffering. I think something big is coming. And I think it might be a massive trade up. I really do.
I don't think that anyone would be willing to deal all the way up into the top 5, nor do I think the Bills would be willing to do it. But I don't think it's, I mean, people are in here saying, no way, no way. I don't think that there is I don't think it's an insane idea to think that now, the way the team's currently structured, that this team tries to find a way towards the top 10. I would still say that they don't.
Yeah.
I would still say that they don't. It doesn't feel like it's in the nature of Brandon Beane to do that. Mm-hmm. But also, this goes back to what I was just saying a couple minutes ago. I got to throw everything out the door now. I don't know what.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Exactly. Because everyone that's saying that, oh, that's insane, that's never going to happen. Who in here thought that we were going to trade Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans for literal crumbs this morning?
That's the thing everybody's got to keep in mind. Nobody thought that on Wednesday, April 3rd, the Bills would trade Stefon Diggs to perhaps the most up-and-coming AFC team with the best young talent, arguably, in the conference, for a second-round pick and a $31 million dead cap hit. No one saw that coming. So there's no way that you can sit here and confidently say, well, now there's no way we go to the top 10. I don't think they do. But you also have to ask yourself, Josh Allen's in the prime of his career right now, and if the season were to start today, Curtis Samuel is going out there as your Stefon Diggs. Okay, yeah. So you got to ask yourself where they currently sit in that war room and what they're going through, right, as far as the conversations are concerned. This is just absolutely nuts, especially when it happens, because we're now 3 weeks away from the draft. There's no way. I mean, listen, at the very least, Dan, trade up or not, there is absolutely no way in hell they don't take a wide receiver in the first round, whether that's trading up or not.
No,
you can't not do it. So there's no.
I mean, listen, we need a double dip. And so we need a double dip. We need to take a wide receiver in the first and the second. That's 1,000% what it is. If we can't trade up into the top 10, get up into the 15, send over that 2025 second, forget about it. Solid trade package. Confirm you get Brian Thomas Jr. You trade up right into like 15, 16, right where he will likely go, and then double down and then grab an Xavier Legette in the second. That right there is what I expect Brandon Beane, what he should do, in my opinion. But then again, man, I mean, like you look at all the promising development from Kincaid his first year. And I know everybody that is a true Bills fan, like when it comes into the top 3 quarterbacks, Josh Allen is your second best quarterback in the NFL for the most part. Vast majority of us, we flex that on a regular basis that we have a top echelon QB. There was once a QB who lost his wide receiver number 1 by the name of Tyreek Hill. That was Patrick Mahomes. And what did he do? He turned around and he won a Super Bowl that following year with a bunch of bum receivers and a tight end. Does that sound familiar to you? We have a Dalton Kincaid.
You know what this seems the most familiar to me? The only thing I can think of, this reminds me of when the Titans moved off of AJ Brown.
That was weird.
Sent him to the Eagles.
Oh, I hope it's not that.
And they drafted what's his face, who's done pretty much next to nothing for him. I can't think of anything else. That happened right before, like they could have either paid AJ Brown or kept him. They moved. Now that was a different situation. It seemed to all come down to finances. Yeah. But this is to me is a similar situation in that you're moving off from the proven veteran with the inevitability that you are going immediately to wide receiver in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
That the Tyreek Hill thing is nice when you think about it in theory, but they've also done everything to the contrary of what every team has done, up until this point. Like we all assume Tyreek Hill's gone. The Chiefs would find a way to be good still, but maybe not nearly what they were with him. And they just go on to win 2 straight Super Bowl championships without him. So the Bills are not the Chiefs. We know that. We know that they have not been able to do what the Chiefs have done. Nobody has. What they've done without Tyreek Hill is even more miraculous than what they did with him, in my opinion. But this is different in the sense that as it stands right now, I don't think the Bills have a guy. The Bills don't have a guy like Kelsey where you look at and say, okay, at least you still have one of your cornerstones. The only cornerstone they have is their quarterback as it currently sits. You love the potential of James Cook. You love the potential of Dalton Kincaid. You love the potential of Khalil Shakir. But that's what it is. It's potential. And like everybody's saying, the Bills also don't have Andy Reid either, maybe the best offensive mind of our generation, to find a way to circumvent a loss of a Tyreek Hill and make the most out of what's around him as it stands. So, what this team is now, Dan, is incredibly young. That's for sure. That's all it is. It's an insanely young team that is going to be nearly 100% reliant on second and third year guys surrounded by Josh Allen, James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, as mentioned. And then you have your veteran presence now that are going to be in their first year with the team. Right.
Yeah.
So, I just can't get over the fact. I can't get over the fact that this was done in what seems to be haste. Like it seems to be done in a very what the hell type manner where you're looking at let's go back just for everybody who doesn't quite know the details surrounding this yet. The Bills will receive a 2025 second round pick from the Texans, a 2024 sixth round pick, and a 2025 fifth round pick. The Texans had that 2025 second round pick from the Vikings, ironically enough. That's going to go to the Bills for Stefon Diggs. And then with the trade parameters out of the way, the Bills are eating $31 million in dead cap this year. Once 2025 rolls around, the Bills will not have any more financial obligation to Stefon Diggs. But you're essentially paying Stefon Diggs $31 million to be a Houston Texan this year. That's basically the best way to put it. And when you think about that, like we'll talk about, for instance, the most recent example of something like this would be the Denver Broncos eating an insane amount of dead cap money to just get Russell Wilson out of their locker room. Sean Payton wanted him gone. When Sean Payton was asked at the coaches and owners meetings if it was hard to get rid of Russell Wilson with the amount of dead cap money involved, he just flat out said no, period, as fast as he possibly could say it. Meaning it didn't matter how much money he was owed. It didn't matter what we'd have to do. He was gone. This, whether Beane's going to say it or not, and he certainly won't. I mean, this is essentially that. If you're willing to eat that amount of dead cap money, mind you, without another wide receiver you feel comfortable about in place as it stands, we'll see what happens after the draft. But as it stands right now, you do not have a succession for Stefon Diggs. You do not have a remotely close second in comparison to Stefon Diggs. You still eat that $31 million cap going into the draft without a bona fide wide receiver one for perhaps one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in a generation. So when you really put your head around the black and whiteness of this, right, the basically just the overarching details, it is a mind-blowing process we're currently unfolding with here in Buffalo.
Now we're putting the tinfoil hats on as well, because you would think it must have been a pretty big issue if he's gone, knowing that. I would say Sean McDermott's probably on the hot seat right now. Wouldn't you agree? That if this year, say that he doesn't reach a certain echelon, that I think more than likely this team will walk away from him. I mean, I went in and I said that I think that if he doesn't at the very least make it to the AFC Championship in 2024, then he's gone. So this makes it twice as hard for Sean McDermott. Maybe at the end of the day, so they're also thinking, they're like, hey, with Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick didn't accept head coaching jobs. That's an insurance policy. Have to ask what he's trying to do. I just can't stomach that Brandon Beane is the sort of GM where he's willing to take a year like this, to go into the season and just roll the dice on some of our younger players and go within it. I don't know, man.
For those asking, I haven't seen the 31 million dead cap anywhere. Here it is via Pro Football Talk. Quote from Mike Florio: "It will be hard to forget him, given that he accounts for $31 million in dead cap under the Buffalo salary cap in 2024. By trading him before June 1, the Bills will take full charge in 2024 instead of splitting it up." So they're taking on the whole load. Now, this is interesting. If they would have traded him after June 1, they would have absorbed only an $8.849 million cap hit in 2024, with the rest being in 2025. So I guess it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. They would have owed him that money regardless. But the way that this was handled, the Bills are going to owe him all of that money right now or throughout the course of 2024. Like I said, none of this money gets pushed back to 2025. And it's all out on the table now for Diggs to go and play with one of the better young quarterbacks in the league, a rookie, coach of the year candidate last year, a healthy Tank Dell now with Joe Mixon. This is something else. And Dan, I know you've probably looked at it by now, but the Bills do indeed play the Houston Texans this year. You can pencil that in pen, in Sharpie, whatever you want. That will be prime time, guaranteed, probably a Sunday night football game with insane ratings, because this is the storyline that will drive everyone into that game. The Bills do indeed play the Houston Texans this year. Let me double check it. Do you know if that's home or away?
It's away.
Is it?
Yeah, most definitely. That one was already circled on my calendar for possibly going to, but now that's going to be one of the away games I go to this year.
Yeah, so just double checking that indeed is away. So Bills will be heading into the dome out in Houston to take on. I mean, I'm so torn here, Dan, and everybody in here. I'm torn because the fact that this is happening makes me feel like it had to happen, if that makes sense. If it didn't happen, that tells me things are fine enough to keep the band together, right? But the fact that this actually happened when just about everybody you would talk to said there's just no way you can foresee it happening with the amount of money they'd have to take in dead money. There's no way you could foresee him trading him to an AFC opponent. Right, all of these things. The fact that this is happening, it really must shed light on something we don't know about quite yet. Maybe we never will. But it certainly sheds light on the fact that this was a pretty bad situation between Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, whoever else, and Stefon Diggs. A year ago when we were going into camp and Stefon Diggs missed the OTAs, he kind of wrote it off because he was gone for a day. He goes in the next day, and we never really hear about it again. He has a great start to the year, right? And we know that the production dives off a bit towards the latter half of the season. But in my opinion, that was just more due to the fact the Bills played an entirely different style of offense that was more conducive to holding onto the ball, running the football, milking the clock, and trying to get out of there with wins and not turning the ball over. That might not have been the case. We have no idea. But within a year time span when this whole thing starts, I guess it really all starts, Dan, when we go back to the beatdown the Cincinnati Bengals handed these Bills in the divisional round.
Yes.
Stefon Diggs is on the sideline with his hands up in the air to Josh Allen. And at the time, and I still feel this way, I thought he was the only one on the team displaying any sort of passion, any sort of remorse for what had just occurred. And he just felt frustrated in the way that game went down. You had a 13-3 year, and you're going to go out getting the doors blown off you. You don't even show up against the Cincinnati Bengals. But that's where it all started, Dan. Everybody took that screenshot of him with his hands up to Allen, and they ran with it. And they said, "Oh, he doesn't like Allen. He wants out." And that's, at the time was peak hilarity. There's no way you could have thought that way, the way the Bills were playing, right?
Yeah.
But it never went away after that. The little digs here, no pun intended, but the little things here, the little things there, the tweet here, the media interview here, it never ever went away after that moment. And what do you know? It just snowballed into what we see today, and it wound up being a complete avalanche that tumbled down the mountain and resulted in these Buffalo Bills moving on from Stefon Diggs. You also have to take into consideration, Dan, the fact that this is now 2 teams Stefon Diggs has been with where he has done the exact same thing to both teams.
Oh, yeah.
You look back at the Minnesota situation.
Same shit.
Right. Same shit. But the argument was always, Dan, oh, it's Kirk Cousins, right? It's Kirk Cousins. Stefon Diggs doesn't want to spend his whole career with Kirk Cousins, right? And when he catches the Minneapolis Miracle, Case Keenum was the quarterback. So everybody at the time was thinking he doesn't want to waste his talent. So he goes to Buffalo, where Josh Allen has been unarguably a top 5 quarterback. You can argue with a wall as far as where you want him within that top 5. Everybody wants to get in an absolute pissing match over that. But in reality, he's a top 2 quarterback, top 3 if you want to really get into the argument here. But I'm not trying to do that today. That's a different
argument.
Burrow's
not too either.
Different argument for a different day. Regardless, though, it doesn't get better, really, than what he had. So we look back at the Viking situation, and we could probably confidently say now, was it really about that situation either? The other question I got to ask you right now, Dan, as I'm just thinking about all this, as I'm just trying to make sense of it, what was Josh Allen's role in this whole thing? When we see this tweet 2 nights ago from Stefon Diggs, where he's asked, or not asked, but he's just commenting on like random people's Twitter threads, like deep into
being a fucking child.
I mean, I don't even do that. I mean, like most people don't go on random people's tweets deep in the threads and start adding their own thoughts. Yet here's Stefon Diggs doing that. Yeah. Right. And in that thread, in that discussion, they were talking about something RG3 had said with Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs. And I think he basically said that their success had kind of been on an upward trajectory together because of one another. Somebody had commented that Josh Allen had benefited Diggs and Diggs had benefited Allen, but Allen's success isn't solely benefited on Diggs, whereas Diggs is solely reliant on Josh Allen or something like that. And Diggs comments back,
"You sure?
You sure?" Question mark.
Dude, listen, Stefon Diggs, I don't want to take anything away from him. He was the training wheels to Josh Allen, right? He was the guy that helped him develop, and I have credited that over and over and over again, that I believe that he was a key piece to his overall development. Him, Cole Beasley, etc. Listen, if you're looking for proof that Josh Allen can absolutely ball out with Stefon Diggs, literally look at Stefon Diggs' stat line from week 8 all the way until the end of the season. I'll tell you what, Z, because I do have a feeling that Josh Allen is kept in the loop from the front office. I really, really do.
I certainly would hope so.
I would love if there was a way that we could leak his text messages, because I almost guarantee you that Beane probably sent him over a text last night being like, "Hey, we're thinking about running this up. I just want to keep you in the loop." Josh Allen still has that fresh in his head. That Stefon Diggs was out there basically sort of throwing an invisible jab at him. I almost guarantee you he probably just said 2 words: "Do it." I'm out. I'm completely out of them. Listen, man, I wonder how many interceptions were accounted to Josh Allen for him trying to force it to Stefon Diggs. I wonder how a lot of his decision-making has been for the past couple of years, where he was nervous that he was going to be pissed off and he was going to want to leave. I wonder how this offense is going to look like now that we are not going to have somebody that obviously is going to be a diva about not getting his targets or not being that true number one going into it. I am very, very curious to see what this offense is going to look like now that Josh isn't going to have that in the back of his head, because he's a human being. He probably knows it. And I mean, now it's more clear than ever that apparently all of the rumors we've heard about Stefon Diggs, right, were true. So, I mean, listen, dude, I think that Josh Allen probably gave his blessing on this one. I can almost guarantee you that. I mean,
look, to kind of emphasize what you're saying, according to one of the best Twitter accounts out there, but put Steve Tasker in the Hall of Fame. Josh Allen's QB rating when passing to Stefon Diggs, 76.97. When not passing to Diggs, 93.39. I mean, we can look at the intricacies all we want. We can sit here and find ways to make ourselves feel better about this. But at the end of the day, this is a wild, wild move. This is as big of a move as the Bills have made as far as a departure is concerned since Josh Allen has been a Buffalo Bill. I mean, this is a massive, massive move. And the thing is that there is just the biggest question now is it's not whether or not the Bills are going to be fine. We saw Josh Allen be fine with John Brown and Cole Beasley. It's not a matter of the Josh Allen not being fine, but it's a matter of who's he going to be fine with. Exactly. You can't be fine with what they currently have right now. It doesn't matter who you have out there, how good you are. It's not set up for success. So these Bills either have to make some sort of massive move outside of the draft, which I just don't foresee, because the only one that really comes to mind or two, but I don't think the other one happened. Justin Jefferson gets thrown out there, but they are adamant and continuously saying they're not getting rid of him. The Bills would not be able to afford that, I would imagine, much less afford the trade compensation that they would be asking for, not including the amount of money that he's going to be owed. So you can pretty much forget that. Yeah. And then T. Higgins is the other one, but I just don't see how the Cincinnati Bengals hand the Buffalo Bills T. Higgins on a silver platter. I mean, flip the roles here. If the Bills handed the Bengals Stefon Diggs, how would you feel about that? I mean, it feels shitty enough handing them to the Texans, but it's not the Bengals yet. It's not the Chiefs. That would have been a whole other element to this. So I don't see the Bengals doing that either. So the ultimate answer comes down to the draft. And that's why, when we were talking earlier, it's not an insane proposition to consider the idea that these Buffalo Bills try to find a way to rocket themselves up. There's no way they get up into the top of the draft. Yeah. But it's nuts if you don't think they're sitting around talking about the possibility of moving up towards 10 or around that area.
Of 9 for Chicago. I mean, honestly, man, he's at least inquiring about number 9 right now. I feel like Brandon Beane is at least inquiring about number 9 right over to Chicago at the end of the day.
No one's saying yes. Oh, Rome Odunze is my favorite. Rome Odunze is my favorite. I'd love nothing more than to have him. Hey, but Pete Crawley, no one's saying the Texans aren't legit. I just got through talking off the top of the show. Oh, I think they're one of the best young teams in this league. I mean, how could you not? But there's a difference, I think. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I must emphasize this. This is one of the elements of this that's so confusing to me. It would have been more confusing to me to give Diggs to a pre-established rival already, like the Chiefs or the Bengals. This still is confusing to me. Giving him to one of the best young teams in the league, in your conference, a team you play this year, and I think a team that's certainly going to be threatening for playoff spots throughout the rest of the Bills' run here, because they're that good. C.J. Stroud's that good. Before C.J. Stroud got hurt, he was in the MVP conversation, much less the Rookie of the Year conversation. Mm-hmm. So that's an element of this. I mean, for sure, that adds even more to the confusion. And it really, Dan, emphasizes the urgency that Brandon Beane clearly had to get him out of the building, because you send him to Houston. It's not like you send him to the Washington Commanders, right? It's not like you send him to the Panthers to go play with Bryce Young, give him a much needed weapon. You're sending him to one of the most up and coming young talented teams in the AFC for a $31 million dead cap hit and at most a second round draft pick in compensation. That's what you're getting at. And not even this year, like you mentioned, you can't even put it to use this year. That's
somebody that can hurt you as well, which is even more head scratching. But I mean, honestly, man, he must have been bad. He must have been so bad that Beane probably would have traded him over to the damn Jets or the Miami Dolphins. That's where it's at right now. Is that I think that Beane got to a point where he would have sent him off anywhere.
I would love to know.
Reasonably.
I would love to know how long conversations have been had for, who the conversations were had with, and what, if any, were the other options on the table as far as trade compensation is concerned. Because this just feels incredibly light, and it just feels like it is an absolute testament to their not desire, but frankly need to get him out of the building.
Yeah.
And is it ironic? Is it irony, Dan, that it comes almost immediately after a pretty low belt shot at Josh Allen? So it seemed from that Diggs tweet. Because guys, you got to go back and look at Diggs's tweets now in a whole different light. They weren't just innocent, busting your chops tweets. He was being dead serious the whole time, clearly. And the one he said the other day about not being sure if Josh Allen's success isn't hinged on him. I mean, we've seen it not be. I don't even know where he's getting that idea from or how anybody could have that idea. But we look at it now. I mean, what was their relationship, Dan? Was it bad? We saw him on the cover of the Sports Illustrated Kid issue, and everybody ate that up, and they're doing so well, and everybody thinks they're best buddies. I'm starting to think, Dan, that was a total smokescreen. And there's no way that these guys, at least towards the end, had a decent off-field relationship. I just can't foresee it. There's no way.
So it had to be over after the Cincinnati game, because even when you watch back on some of the interviews, like even asking, like, hey, Josh, how do you feel about Stefon? Or hey, Stefon, how do you feel about Josh? It always seemed half-assed, right? He's like, oh, yeah, that's my boy. Or that's my dog. Like back in the day, like they would like joke around and everything along those lines. Like they go on like big tangents about how important they were. But it's funny how hindsight is 20/20, but you can definitely see like their overall attitude completely shift up. Now, I mean, I have to ask you this. I mean, with the rest of the AFC East, I would say more so the Jets is what I'm thinking. How confident are you right now in this team that we're still just going to be competitive right in the AFC? It's like, where do you see the Buffalo Bills? And obviously this is an overreaction, but like, where do you see the Buffalo Bills right now? What's your overreaction? How are we finishing?
They don't drop it all. Absolutely nothing. I will stand my ground unless Josh Allen decides to go on a sabbatical for the 2024 season. They're not losing the AFC East. The Jets are still the Jets, folks. Sorry to burst your bubble if you think that a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers off an ACL tear is going to come over and win the AFC East for this team. I will literally put a crow in the oven, bake it at 350, come on here and eat it. There's not a chance. There's no way. Yeah. Everybody's talking about them like they're a Super Bowl contending team again like they were last year. I don't know how the lesson isn't learned that team outside of Aaron Rodgers is just not good enough. And with them, I mean, how much better are they when you consider the fact that he is now 40 years old off of a major injury with a pretty weak offensive line? And I'm sure they'll add to it, but come on, let's be real. And then the Miami Dolphins chance was last year. The Bills weren't playing their best football, and they had a 3-game lead on the Bills, and they couldn't close in on it. They couldn't finish the job. So I have no trust in the Miami Dolphins. I have no trust in the New York Jets, and then Patriots are in rebuild mode. That is what it is. I still think the Bills end up winning the division, but when we talk about the grander scheme of things, yeah, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to decipher right now. That's what I'm trying to figure out in my head. How much do I think that this actually affects them? I don't think it changes much for me in regard to the AFC East. I don't know how much it changes for me in regard to the AFC. My man, Joe Marino, I got to find it. He just put up the stats of Stefon Diggs in the playoffs. I forget. I got to find the exact tweet, but he put up the numbers.
It's not good.
And they're not good.
Spoiler alert.
Not good. So I got to be rational here. As much as this sucks, and it sucks, how much things change?
Nothing changes.
I don't know.
It's a lateral move. It's a lateral move, man. That's exactly what it is.
Let me find Joe's tweet just so I can make sure to give him credit on the numbers he wound up finding. Here they are. So here are the 3 games in elimination games for Stefon Diggs with the Bills in the playoffs. 3 catches, 21 yards this past season. And, of course, the big drop on the final drive of the game for the Bills. 4 catches, 35 yards in 2022 against the Bengals in that loss. And then 3 catches, 7 yards against the Chiefs in 2021. So what's going to be the fall off will be to be determined. I mean, like Cole's saying, we might be taking a step back. I'm not denying that. But is a step back losing the East? I don't know. The Dolphins took a step back this offseason. Are you kidding? They lost like 6 starters. So we have no idea what their step back's going to be. The Jets, we got to see the step forward before we can even talk about a step back because we don't know what they're going to be. I'm just basing the Jets being the Jets on what I've seen the past decade or so. They can prove me wrong if they want. They'll be proving everybody wrong, though. That's the key. And then you got the Patriots. I mean, it would be a Herculean ask for them to all of a sudden, they'd have to do what the Texans did last year. Come out of absolutely nowhere and just be great because they drafted the right rookie quarterback, whether that's, whoever they wind up with, Drake May, whoever it may be. That would have to come down to that situation. But as far as a step back is concerned, there's no way you can say that this isn't a step back in regard to what they had. What the effect of that step back is to be determined. I mean, like we talked about earlier, with the Chiefs losing Tyreek Hill, that was a step back. They still had the team in place to go on and do what they've done, 2 straight championships. I know the Bills aren't the Chiefs, but when you have a great quarterback, these step backs are able to be masked more than other teams would display in certain circumstances such as this currently that the Bills are facing. But it's really, to me, Dan, going to depend on what's done in this draft. That's going to make me feel one way or the other about how I feel this step back is going to be viewed.
It's going to have to be a double dipping, man. And I swear to God, bro, if we turn on the television on that Thursday night and we go with an offensive guard from South Dakota, of the community college somewhere in the first round, I'm going to absolutely blow a gasket. I feel like that we need this. It is absolutely painted in the stars that we need to find a solution. We certainly need to, but I don't know, man. I feel like right now, so the only thing that would make me feel better is if there was news breaking that Tua is now the highest paid quarterback in the league on a
I'll take that
contract.
I would take that.
Yeah. I think that might be the only thing that would get me going. But it's still shocking. And I mean, I'll go ahead and I'll leave you with this because I got to start prepping for the huddle right over on BetUS TV. We're fine. And so we continuously flex that we have an elite quarterback. We paid him a lot of money. In my opinion, he has earned every single penny that he has earned thus far during his contract. And now it's time for him to do the exact same thing next year. Diggs helped Allen develop. He did not make Josh Allen. And the run next year is about to be beautiful.
I love it. We'll leave you with that, Dan. Thanks for coming on with me and getting down into the madness that's occurring today. I appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
You going on BetUS right now?
We're going to be live in about 35 minutes. I got to go ahead and just try and mentally prepare myself for what TD and Richie are about to do.
I was going to say, head high. They're going to come after you.
It's twice today, too. It's twice today. It's that and then on the AFC's roundtable.
Unbelievable. Well, hey, give them as much hell as you can. Let them know it doesn't faze you. Let them know.
See you, bro.
See you, Dan. All right. Dan Mitchell, thanks as always for him joining us. So we were just talking about what's the drop off for these Bills. And as you know, I constantly like to refer to the betting markets to get a grasp on how this is overall being viewed, right? How is this whole thing being viewed in the betting market? Because the betting market can give you a pretty good indication as to how trades like this impact teams and their perceived winning in this coming up season. So let's go over to BetUS right now and we'll take a look. And folks, these are the updated odds. Nothing, the numbers have changed a bit, but the favorites have not. The Bills are still plus 165 and the favorite to win the AFC East. They were the favorite going into today with Stefon Diggs. They are the favorite as it stands right now without Stefon Diggs. We go down to the Super Bowl odds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The Bills are tied right now for 4th. The Bills are currently tied right now for the 4th best Super Bowl odds. So we can sit here all we want to talk about the drop back, the fall off, the step back. Is it inevitable that the Bills, without Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse, probably Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White, Stefon Diggs, Gabe Davis, is it inevitable that this is a step back to some degree? Yes, I'm not delusional. This team is not going to be what it was. But it's not a step back to the degree in which the result is these Bills falling off the face of the earth in regard to how they're viewed and how they're perceived to do this upcoming season. You're looking at it right here. The Bills are still the AFC East favorite, and they're still in the betting market for the Super Bowl odds, the 4th overall favorite to win. By the way, BetUS, link in the description below, 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,500. And that's via the code JOIN125. And look, there they are. The Bills plus 165. This number has narrowed a bit. They were, I think, plus 140, and the Dolphins were plus 180 at one point. So the number has narrowed a bit, but the Bills are still the favorites here. And then they're tied for 4th or 5th down here. It looks like 5th. These numbers are a little out of order. It looks like they're tied for 5th right now with the Bengals for the best overall Super Bowl chances. So that's currently where it stands. You know, no one's saying that we're going to win the Super Bowl. No one's saying this and that. I'm just talking about where they're at, where they're viewed. And they're tied for 5th down here, and they're the current favorite as the 1 seed. Quick word from BetUS. We're going to get into what you guys are thinking about this whole thing in the comment section as we unpack Stefon Diggs leaving the Buffalo Bills and becoming a Houston Texan.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
Man, I can't believe I worked all night last night and was not up for this in real time. Like when I woke up to this, just to go back and look, I had like five or 6 missed calls, about 100 missed text messages, all these Twitter notifications. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is going on? It never even occurred to me that this was, you know, the possible situation that was unfolding. It just didn't occur to me. You know, once the peak of free agency ends, and then you get into April and you're talking more about the draft, this has just kind of become, honestly, it never was anything to me. This was never anything to me. The idea of Stefon Diggs leaving was never a real possibility to me. I never gave it any credence. That's why I said earlier, that's why I feel so stupid today. I just feel so dumb today. And I'm sure there's people taking a victory lap, but at the time, those people seemed so far, their takes seemed so far-fetched. And they weren't. You know, they weren't. The question is now, right? The question now. What's the inevitable outcome of this? There's no way, like I keep mentioning, there's no way that there isn't some sort of regression here when you lose the amount of veteran leadership that they do. How long is the regression, right? Is it halfway through the season? Does it take a half a season for the Bills to figure it out and all of a sudden they get right? Does it take a full season? Does it take multiple seasons? Does it take a season at all? Did the Bills get right in the draft and things just start clicking off the top? You don't know. I think it would be a bit foolhardy to imagine that these Bills aren't in some shape or form trotting out into the start of the 2024 season with just less capability on the field. FCQ77, he's saying, we couldn't win it all with Diggs. We needed a reset. That's the way she goes. the crazy reality of this whole thing is that you're right. With all of these guys that we have gotten rid of this offseason, whether they were cap casualties or whatever you want to call this, I don't know what to call this. This isn't a cap casualty. I don't know what the hell this is. This is full-blown insanity, to be 100% frank with you. This is what this is. There is no adequate way to sum up what this is other than an absolute effing mess. This is just, that's what this is. But with all of these guys in place for the Bills, the farthest they got was an AFC championship where they got the doors blown off of them by Kansas City. That's as far as they got. So there's almost some solace in that. There really is. Maybe that wasn't it. We thought it was it. Maybe it wasn't it. Maybe this next wave is it. But it's going to be a time will tell type situation and really nothing more than that. That's what it is. We can't possibly try and understand the impact that all of these moves are going to have on the Bills until, one, we see how the draft unfolds. Two, the rest of free agency, the rest of the offseason in totality here. And then three, until we get out on that damn field. Until the Bills get out on that field and put it on display. But I'll say this for a 100% certainty. You are out of your mind if you think the Bills are trotting out Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, Khalil Shakir, a second-year tight end, and a third-year running back as their entire core on offense this year. There is going to be at least one major move at the wide receiver position made. Whether that's, now when I say major, it's up to you how you define major. Could it be major, all the way up to the top of the draft for a big name in this upcoming first round? Maybe. I highly doubt you see the Bills get anywhere inside of the top. I mean, the highest I could possibly see the Bills going would be 9 through 12, and that would be completely dependent on, one, someone being able to work with them, two, them having the capability of supplying that team with what they're looking for, and three, the most important, the guy they want being there. There's a lot that hinges on it, and it's also as high as I see them going. You put a gun to my head and you say, what do I think that they do? I don't think they wind up trading up to that area. Do I think that they're going to trade up, though? Now I do more than ever. Where that is, I don't know. Maybe it's just outside of the pick 20 mark. Maybe it's in the mid to late teens. It just feels like it would be too much for the Bills to currently take on to get inside of the top 10. Nor do I think that there are teams right now that want to give up those assets in place. You got to remember, inside of that area, almost every team's going after quarterback. The teams that aren't are in desperate need of putting pieces around their quarterback, like the Chargers, for instance, at the pick 5 position. And I don't think you'd ever see it. I mean, even if Brandon Beane had all the assets in the world, I highly doubt a first-year coach in Jim Harbaugh is going to want to come in and immediately give his 5th round pick to one of the best teams in his conference. So, I mean, it's just, these are things you have to think about, even when you're talking about these pipe dreams. Everybody keeps saying T. Higgins. I mean, do you really think the Bengals are just going to sit back and say, I know we've been going toe to toe for the last several years since we've drafted Joe Burrow for playoff seeding. We've played each other in the playoffs. We've had major regular season matchups. But hey, here's our second best wide receiver. You can go ahead and take him. It's not happening. That would be as stunning to me as this whole Stefon Diggs situation is. So that's not happening. You got Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, guys like that. You see them going anywhere. This is the whole situation at hand. You have situations in mock drafts where they're gone before the 10th pick is even taken. You also have situations that I've seen where they fall just outside of it. A lot would have to go right for the Bills to be able to pull this off, and that's why I just don't see it in the cards. But something will be in the cards. right? Whether that's, a Lad McConkey, whether that's them trading up. If you go through a lot of these mock drafts, the wide receiver run happens real early, and then it starts to take a bit of a pause, and then it gets ramped up again when you hit around the pick 20 mark. So in the top 10, you're going to see the neighbors, Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze is gone. They're going to be gone. At the very most, one of them falls to like max 12, and that's being like, I'm talking the extreme max. I don't really foresee them falling outside of the 10th pick position. But then you get into the area around the 20s to mid 20s where it's Brian Thomas, it's Adonai Mitchell, it's Lad McConkey, and then after that you got a lot of these guys graded out into second round picks. One of these guys is going to be a Buffalo Bill. I just don't foresee the possibility of that not being the case. One, how could it not be just based on your current roster makeup? How could it not be? There's no other way. I really don't have to say anything else other than that. But two, it just feels like it would be sacrilegious to the fan base to not take a wide receiver after you send Stefon Diggs shipped off to Houston in an unforeseen move on a random Wednesday in April. I have more questions than there are answers for currently. That's what the situation for me is right now. This whole thing has created far more questions for me than it has answers. The one thing that we have gotten an answer to is that the relationship between Diggs and this team, not good. I don't know how it could be. You could look at it any other way. Now, the question I have within that, which relationship, parentheses, ships? The relationship with Allen, the relationship with Beane, with McDermott, Joe Brady, other guys on this roster. I don't know. But you'll look back. The timeline, like I said earlier in the show, it started with the hands up in the air to Josh Allen after the beatdown to Cincinnati in the divisional. And, at the time, it was a good thing to me. The passion being displayed, the frustration that they were getting the doors blown off of them in a game that they very well should have at least been competitive in, and they weren't. But then after that, it just felt like nothing was the same for some weird reason. It didn't feel like that moment justified what came from it. But at the end of the day, it looks like that was the beginning of the end. Because after that, we would go on to see a barrage of different tweets at different times. We would go on to see countless interviews between Diggs and whoever being asked about his relationship with Josh Allen, his desire to be in Buffalo. And it felt like every time we got a different answer. But the one that stood out the most was when recently here, I think it was around the Super Bowl, when he said that he had already given his answer. And if you go back and look at the answer given, he had said in a press conference at either training camp or something in Buffalo with local reporters that his desire was to stay in Buffalo, was to remain in Buffalo, retire a Buffalo Bill, this, that, the other thing. So we all sat around, and I think it was a combination of a couple things. One, it's the fan delusion and denial that we all have to some degree. Nobody wanted to sit around and say, yeah, well, there's a very good likelihood that the Buffalo Bills move off of their best wide receiver. It's very highly likely that the Buffalo Bills get rid of Diggs, and, that's that. No one wants to come to that conclusion, even if the breadcrumbs led us there the whole time. But the main reason why I think nobody wanted to go to that conclusion is because it didn't make any sense to go to that conclusion. At least at the time. What sense did it make to sit back and say, based on Stefon Diggs' ominous tweets, the Bills are going to take a $31 million dead cap hit and trade him for a second-round pick in 2025. I mean, let's just rewind to a month ago, okay, when the peak of free agency started, or whatever it was, a few weeks ago. And let's say that this was being tossed around. People were tossing around this idea, and you read it. I don't think anybody would read that and say, oh, makes sense to me. Everyone would have said, what the hell is this guy smoking? Is this on the banned substance list? I mean, is this a scheduled 10 drug that this person's smoking? Putting out the idea that Stefon Diggs could be let go for a second-round pick to an up-and-coming Houston Texans team while the Bills go out to lunch on a $31 million tab? Hell no. That's why today I see a variety of comments, and there's a variety of different angles that everyone's taking. It's not that we're on here talking about the Bills, they're screwed, right? We're not talking about that. We're not talking about, I mean, there's so many things you can talk about. The most shocking aspect of this whole thing, though, is just how this is all happening. Outside of everything else on the field, outside of the relationships and the bridges burnt here inevitably, outside of what your thoughts were on Diggs, outside of his tweets or whatever, the brass tacks, black and white reality is that the Bills took on a $31 million cap hit all at once for a second-round pick that isn't even this current season, so they can't use it. I mean, I guess they could technically use it to try and make a move this year because you can, of course, trade your future picks. But if that isn't something that they do, then it doesn't help them this year. And the one thing lost on, I think the one thing that might be getting lost here, I mean, the Houston Texans are one of the best teams in this league right now. I don't know how you could argue against that. They were phenomenal last year. I mean, certainly if you want to say offense at the very least, one of the best offenses in this league. This is a team last year that had absolutely no expectations from anybody. And when you look at the roster that they have on offense, how young it is, and how much money and capital they'll have to work with C.J. Stroud's rookie deal. I mean, if he's that good in year one, and a lot of these guys are on rookie deals, but this is their current roster as it stands right now. Here's the Houston Texans roster. And, you know, this is where it starts to hurt when you compare this to the Bills roster as it stands. There's a bit of a difference there. Stroud, Mixon, Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. I mean, their weaponry unit here, maybe outside of Detroit and Green Bay, arguably, find me a better, younger roster in the league. I think it's certainly the best young roster in the AFC. Now, Jay's saying this. He's saying, y'all say Josh is so good. Let him prove it. If he's that guy, he can do more with less. This is a double-edged sword, Jay, right? There's part of the fan base that wants to say, yeah, Allen's that guy. We don't need Diggs. Allen's that guy. He'll get it done with whoever's out there. Maybe that's true. But do you really want to look back at Josh Allen's career and say that at the peak of his tenure, in the middle of his most prominent years, his wide receiver one was Curtis Samuel? No. That would just be an absolute, it'd be absolute malpractice. from the Buffalo Bills organization. I'll tell you this right now. This move does seem to have been made in haste. I can't lie. It feels as though, like Dan sort of said, whether this happened or not is maybe to never be decided. I have no idea. But it does feel like Beane got a call with an offer, and he just said, okay. I mean, because the way that this is all structured out, what the Bills are getting in return, what they have to go on, or what they have to take on, it doesn't seem like it was the most thought out situation. But Brandon Beane, there is no way, even if this move was made a bit hastily, there is no way he makes this move without at least some sort of blueprint in place. Whether that's completely lined out or whether that's a rough sketch, Beane's got something written down in the notebook to be able to overcome this pretty drastic, pretty blindsided type move here. What is that? Tell you this, the draft just got infinitely more interesting. I was already beyond intrigued about the idea of the Bills' situation in this upcoming draft, just because it felt like it was up in the air as to what side of the ball they were going to go towards. It was up in the air as to whether or not they could move up, whether they could move down. Now I feel like the pressure is on, because there doesn't seem to be any. I mean, I don't know how you guys see it, but there doesn't seem to be any room for speculation anymore. How can you sit around and speculate the Bills going defensive line when they don't have a wide receiver one? And they have a very young, still trying to prove his way into the league, wide receiver two, and Khalil Shakir. I mean, Khalil Shakir had a great second half of the year last year. Are you ready to just pen him in as the guy? That wide receiver too? I mean, like, he's going to have to earn that and continue to prove that. This is a pretty makeshift Buffalo Bills offense right now, outside of a couple of pieces you feel pretty damn good about. James Cook, Dalton Kincaid. Brandon Ayuk's a name I keep seeing being thrown out. I think it just came out over the weekend or this past week that he and the Niners are at a standstill as it comes in regard to a new contract. I mean, we'll see. I love Brandon Ayuk. One of the only other names out there right now that you could maybe consider. Like I keep saying, the T. Higgins, to me, there's just no way. There's no way. And that's really where the buck stops. There's just nothing else. Digesting all of this in real time, as you guys are as well. I'm sitting here. My main thought right now. Diggs is gone, right? Nothing I can do about that now. I mean, I got all this. You got the jersey, the bobblehead. I mean, that's what I hate the most about this shit. It's like the guy's supposed to be here for the long haul, and you're like fully bought in on that. Not happening. The more I sit here and think about it, the more all I can really think about. What's the move? What's the answer? And the more I know I said earlier, I feel like it's really tough for the Bills to do this. But the more I sit here and think about it, I mean, really ask yourself this. If you're the GM, right? If you're Brandon Beane. I know many of you guys in here keep saying you don't want this to happen. You wouldn't do this, whatever. Doesn't it feel like you don't do something like this unless you plan on making a major splash in the draft. The more I'm sitting here thinking about the ideology behind it, the mindset behind it, and the mindset about what to do with this situation moving forward, the more I start to think they got to be moving up. To me, I guess that right now, I'd almost be willing to put in pen, they're moving up. In pencil, how far? Because that's to be determined. That, to me, is the biggest variable. I'm starting to think right now moving up isn't even a variable at this point. I feel like it's becoming more and more of a certainty. I feel like this is becoming more and more of a lock. You cannot, if you keep thinking about it, right? Put your bias aside, put what you would do aside, put what you think the real outcome of this scenario is going to be. If you sit on your hands until 28 and there's a major run at wide receiver from pick 20 to pick 27, you're screwed. You're screwed. He can't do that. Once again, malpractice to me. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm running scenarios through my mind, the more it feels like malpractice to sit back and wait for something to happen at 28. And the more I think about Beane's willingness to make this move today with Stefon Diggs, the more I feel like there has got to be some idea in mind for the succession plan. Rob's saying no way. Second round super deep. I mean, if we get lucky, Rob, how's the fan base going to feel if the Bills' succession plan is Stefon Diggs is a second round wide receiver? Maybe that's what you want. Maybe that's what a bunch of people want. Tell you this, the vast majority of the fan base, it will be pitchforks lit on fire virtually on Twitter the night of the draft, if that's the solution. And there's certainly part of me that might be part of that. I don't know how I could possibly feel comfortable going into the season knowing that the answer is the second round wide receiver. Now, with that said, plenty of wide receivers in second round and beyond have become unbelievable studs in this draft, but it's a risk. Not that the first round isn't. It certainly is. And moving up adds to that risk a whole hell of a lot. But you are continuing to add to that risk in a very, very scary way the further you go down the draft board. And as we were talking about a bit earlier, it feels like the draft pick at wide receiver in the round one isn't even the only solution. A double dip seems all but inevitable. Now, when I say double dip, I might not be talking about round one and round two, depending on how things go. Maybe that's the case. But you'd have to think they don't have a third round draft pick. They're going to have to trade back up into round three and find a way to get another one of these guys. If it's as deep as everybody's saying, and it certainly looks like it is, then you're going to have to take advantage of the situation at hand this season. Who knows how deep that the wide receiver room will be next year or the year after that or the year after that. You know, this is why Rico and I got in such a heated argument about this last week when we were talking about the wide receiver situation. You don't know what the future is going to hold as far as availability in the draft at the wide receiver position. You cannot just sit back and wait and hope that things fall your way down the line. The Bills don't even have that luxury anymore. The argument him and I were having was with the idea in place that Stefon Diggs was still on this roster. I mean, with that out of the way, I mean, I don't even know what argument you can make against trying to make major moves at wide receiver in this draft. I understand D tackle depth is sorely needed. I understand safety is sorely needed, right? I understand there's a variety of situations at play. I understand they could certainly benefit from adding to the offensive line, perhaps at the center position. I get all that. We waited I mean, when I say we, I mean my generation. We waited our entire lives for a quarterback like Josh Allen to be leading the charge of this organization. And we are going to sorely regret the idea of him trotting out on this field without Brandon Beane doing the most he could in the draft to make sure he had the pieces around him to get the most out of him. We're going to look back and we're going to be sick about it. Richie's saying, not worried, Bot. Remember, Diggs didn't do anything in the playoffs and was bad after week 6. Beane doesn't do this without a plan. Trust me. There's definitely a plan. Think about the mutiny that would occur if there is no plan. You know, part of being a GM, outside of doing all the things that are part of the job title, considering that what's going to happen with the fan base is certainly a part of it's an ingredient in the stew. Not the biggest ingredient. It might only be a sprinkle. But don't think for a second that they don't know that if they go into that draft and they don't find a way to get an adequate replacement for Diggs, at least on paper, that they don't know that this entire fan base is going to blow a gasket. And for good reason, because how could you not? The whole thing about Diggs not doing anything in the playoff, this is where I'm so torn. It's just like, because it's true. I mean, it really is true. The Bills willed their way into the playoffs last year on the legs of Josh Allen and the legs of of James Cook. And in my opinion, much improved decision-making from Josh Allen and Joe Brady's willingness to just do the common sense thing routinely. They didn't back their way into the playoffs and back their way into an AFC East title for the 4th consecutive year on the hands of Stefon Diggs. In fact, it was quite the opposite. That is the reality. And in the playoff game against the Chiefs, the thing he'll be most known for in that game was certainly nothing he did to contribute to the team, but what he did to contribute to the loss. That's the facts. That's just the facts. So there's part of me that needs to sit here, and all of us need to sit here and say, this is a damn blow to the balls, no question. But they did a lot of good without him being a major contributor to it. But the other half is certainly just as poignant, and that is the first half of the season, Stefon Diggs was on fire. Stefon Diggs probably had his best years of his career in Buffalo, and he 100% transcended Josh Allen to that next level of superstardom when he came to Buffalo. Both of these things can be true. It all depends on what you value the most. But I think at the end of the day, it is foolish to say that the loss of Stefon Diggs is not major. It is. We can sit back and say what we want. I mean, this is the exact same thing we did during the whole Twitter spree with him. We as fans, and this is for every fan base of every sport, so it's not just us, and it's not like we're insane or whatever. I mean, we are because we're fans, and that's the fanatic. The fanatic definition would be pretty much linear with that of lunacy. I mean, really. But what we did during his whole Twitter spree / media tour / everybody talking about this situation, and what we did is we sat back and we gave it absolutely no validity. We continuously shot it down. All we said was we wrote down in permanent marker, he's not going anywhere. Do not worry. There's nothing to worry about. Stefon Diggs is a Buffalo Bill. And all of that wound up being big old egg on our face. Big old bird shit right on your forehead. So what we're currently doing right now is we're trying to find ways to denounce Diggs' talent on the Bills to make us feel better about us moving off the Bills moving off of them. That's what we're trying to do. Some of it is true, but it has to be facts-based. Some of it is true. What occurred at the end of last year into the playoffs is a pretty damn good example of the Bills' capability of winning games without Stefon Diggs spearheading the offense as far as what Josh Allen has to work with. He didn't. But at the same time, the Bills were the Bills, the Super Bowl favorites, the whatever, top of the league team, in big part of the acquisition of Stefon Diggs. So it's a two-way street here. You can't have it just one way. And a lot of people are going to do that, and I get it. They're going to look back and say, like we've done it a couple times on here already. But they're facts backed. They're backed by facts. Like when we looked at earlier, Josh Allen's under Joe Brady, Josh Allen's completion percentage when targeting, or his passer rating when targeting Diggs was like 75. When not targeting Diggs, it was like 93. There's all these variables. At the end of the day, you can find a stat to back up just about anything you want. That's true. But there's no denying that, we'll look at him right now. There's no denying that the end of the year for Stefon Diggs this past season was not good. Man, this is going to take some getting used to. Look at this. Stefon Diggs, Houston Texans wide receiver. Good God almighty. So, as you'll recall, the beginning of the year, Stefon Diggs was off to a start where you're thinking, man, he's still the best he's still arguably top 3, 4, 5 in this league. Right? The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games, 5 of the first 6 games, he had 100+ yards. In 5 of the first 6 games and 5 touchdowns. He was averaging 100 yards and a touchdown per game up until about mid-October. As we know, right around this Giants, well, really the Jacksonville game, after the losing of Matt Milano, it was right around this period where things started to visibly hit a skid for the Buffalo Bills. They lose to Jacksonville. The offense looked terrible that whole game. They lose Matt Milano. It was what it was, but after the absolute tirade they went on in weeks 2, 3, and 4, you didn't know exactly what to make of it. But when you saw how bad they looked against the Giants, when you saw them lose on the road to Mac Jones, they went toe-to-toe with Baker Mayfield all night. They looked terrible against Cincinnati. Too many men on the field against Denver. All of these games, starting right around where Diggs' numbers fell off, is where the Bills started to seemingly fall off. And you might think, well, maybe that was a big contributor to why they didn't look so good. Well, up until about the Denver game, you could definitely make that argument. But then, as we know, right after the Denver game, Joe Brady takes over at OC. Joe Brady takes over at OC, and they win 6 of 7 to make it to the playoffs and win the AFC East. The winning certainly changed. The amount of points on the board certainly seemed to change. Diggs' numbers didn't. 32-6 win over the Jets. He had 27 yards. The best game he had with these Bills, right around the time Joe Brady took over, was the final game, the regular season game he'd play with these Buffalo Bills. 7 catches on 8 targets against the Dolphins for 87 yards. But up until that game, right around the bye week, he had 3 of his final 5 games as a Bill. He had less than 30 yards receiving. And he wouldn't score a touchdown the final 5 games. And let's see here. He's just to put it into perspective. The first 5 games, he was averaging over 100 yards a game and a touchdown per game. Through the first 5 games, he had 100 yards in 4 of 5 and a touchdown, an average of a touchdown per game. He had 3 against Miami, 1 against the Jets, 1 against Jacksonville. So through 5 games, Diggs was averaging 100 yards per game, and he had 5 total touchdowns. Obviously, the Bills would go on to play 12 remaining games. He would score 3 more touchdowns in 12 games. 5 touchdowns in the first 5 games, 3 touchdowns in the final 12 games. In the first 6 games, Stefon Diggs had a 100-yard game in 5 of them, 5 of the 6 games. He would not record a 100-yard performance again the rest of the season. So in the first 6 games, 5 of the 6 games resulted in Stefon Diggs having 100 yards or more. In the final 11 games, Stefon Diggs did not reach 100 yards once. The closest he got was 87, with multiple games sprinkled in here of 50 yards or less. I mean, if we look at the amount of games where he had 50 yards or less, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So through the final leg of the season, he had as many games under 30 yards as he did 100-yard games through the first 6 games of the season. It's a major loss, but when you go back and look at last year, the Bills, they showed you they're capable of succeeding without him being in a position where he's succeeding in a major way himself. Ismail says, losing Diggs, McConkey makes too much sense. McConkey would be if they stay around 28 or move slightly up. So if you think the Bills aren't going to move up in the draft in a drastic way, McConkey will make sense. He could certainly fall to 28 if the Bills are too worried about him making his way to 28, which I feel like they should be. That is a very risky way to approach the draft, just assuming a guy like McConkey will make his way to 28. They would have to move up into the low 20s, maybe further, depending on how urgent they're trying to be. But the idea of McConkey is completely predicated on the idea the Bills stay around where they're currently slotted to pick at 28. Brennan's saying, so what's the plan, Z Beane? You've got pick 28, and you need to move up, 15 spots? This 2024 and 2025 first-round picks get us there. They'd probably have to move up higher than 15 spots. I don't see Roma Dunze or Neighbors or anyone, whoever, the top end caliber wide receivers, they're not falling to 13. Like I said earlier, I feel like 12 at the very, very, very high point, but the Bills can't risk that. It would have to be a very last second trade in order to get that done. They'd have to watch the board fall and not have anything in place to begin with. It would certainly take, it'll certainly take this year's first and next year's first. I don't know what else beyond that, but it'll certainly take a future first round pick. And I'm sure multiple other picks as well. I mean, it's not going to be a cheap move. There's going to have to be a lot of thought put behind this. This is a franchise-altering move. I'm not talking about making this move in jest here. I mean, I'm not talking about doing this off the seat of your ass. This is going to have to be a well-thought-out plan that Beane's got about 3 weeks to craft here if they want to do something like that. Because it is a major, major move. It's going to be an exorbitant amount of draft capital, assuredly. And what comes from that is what you hope to be your long-term answer. I'll just say this. If it works, no one's going to care what they give up for him. You might care in the moment. You might go on Twitter, and if the Bills make a major move up there, you might go on Twitter and see a barrage of people bitching up a storm about the amount of capital Brandon Beane gave up to get him. But if Ramo Dunze or Malik Neighbors or whoever the hell they trade up for, if that guy winds up being Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, no one's going to say boo. No one's going to give two shits about what the Bills gave up. But you got to hit it. You got to hit it. I've been saying for months now that I feel like this is the biggest draft of Brandon Beane's career. I don't think there's any dispute on that now. With the amount of talent lost on this team, with the amount of veteran leadership lost on this team, and with the dire need to continue to capitalize on having Josh Allen in Buffalo in these prime years, you can't tell me this is not as big as it gets for GM Brandon Beane. And in big moments, you got to make a big move. In big moments, you got to make a statement. And it feels more and more inevitable that a statement is going to be made on April 25th. Or is it, wait, is that the date of the, I thought it was the 25th, right? I keep saying 3 weeks from tomorrow. I feel like I'm off on that. One sec. Yeah, the 25th. So, okay, so it is 3 weeks from tomorrow. Right? Yeah. Now, the question, yeah, 3 weeks from tomorrow. I don't know why I'm brain bleeding over that. The question now, if a move is a move made prior to Thursday, April 25th, or is the move made the day of? Is the move made mid-draft? The tension has now gotten increasingly higher. The stakes have gotten increasingly higher. And the anxiety, at least on my end, is surely doubled in regard to them needing to get this right. Richie's saying, trust Beane. A lot of us fans weren't high on Allen when drafted. It worked out great so far. They got to move from 28 to, say, 15 and get 2 wide receivers total. 2 wide receivers minimum. Where they end up taking the second one is to be still, fleshed out and debated. There's part of me that would absolutely love a first round and a second round wide receiver lottery ticket. I mean, imagine both of them hit. But as deep as it seems to be, you could get your future wide receiver locker room down pat within 2 picks of 1 draft. But you're going to have to do that at the cost of other areas of this team that need succession plans as well. But the one thing that keeps coming to mind for me, of course, is that Josh Allen is your quarterback. Josh Allen is your quarterback. Therefore, the assets at your disposal need to be implemented to get the most out of a generational quarterback. And when you just lost the guy that was supposed to be that answer until he hung the cleats up. Next move, Brandon Beane. What have you done for me lately? If you could define this league based on one quick saying, it would be that. What have you done for me lately? That's the NFL. Maurice is saying Beane will get a vet wide receiver before the draft, then we'll take one with our 1st and 4th round picks. I mean, you can get vets till you're blue in the face like they already have, but that's not the answer. The Bills now have 2 problems that they have to solve. They have to solve the short-term problem at wide receiver, and even more importantly, they have to solve the long-term problem. Diggs was the long-term answer. And you could argue that they should have started to have this mindset even prior to getting rid of Diggs, because they knew the situation at hand and they knew Diggs wasn't going to be around forever. So that ideology was probably already in place. But now it's got to be at the forefront. You have 2 major issues at that position you have to solve, short-term and long-term. And that's why the more you think about it, the more making a major move upward makes sense, because it solves both of those problems if you wind up hitting on that pick. Now, if you're talking veteran as far as a move, like the only one that I could see happening, and it would still shock me, but the only one I could see happening would be Brandon Ayuk. And if you go and get a guy like Brandon Ayuk, then maybe you approach the draft a bit differently, but that's all hearsay at this point. All I can bank on right now is the fact that they have the draft coming up. I can't bank on any other idea of getting another guy in here that's outside of their control. I mean, Brandon Ayuk's currently having major disputes with his own team and the Niners about a contract. What are the Bills going to be able to do? What are the Bills going to be able to do? And these are the things you have to consider as well. And this is what we were talking about earlier. Bills fan 7883 saying just because Beane wants to make a trade doesn't mean a team will want to. What team in the top 10 realistically going to trade? That's the other thing. I mean, this is why there's part of me that thinks that it will happen because it seemingly needs to happen, but there's other part of me that makes it seem like it's very difficult to happen because of what you're talking about. You're going to have not only a team be able to work with you and want to do this with you, you're going to have to offer something enticing enough for them to be able to come up out of that spot. Chicago would be probably the one people would hone in on the most just because they have 2 top 10 picks. And we all know that the top pick is going to Caleb Williams, and maybe they want to load up on additional capital to continue to build this team and not put all their eggs into the top 10 basket. So that's one. The other one that you look at might be, I don't know. The further you go up, the more unlikely it's going to happen. Like I would say the Chargers, but it's not going to happen because one, I just don't see the Chargers giving a pick like that to the Bills. 2, I don't think the Bills have what it takes to get to 5. 3, I also feel like the Chargers need that pick for a wide receiver themselves. I mean, it depends on what these teams want to do. What the Falcons want to do at 8. They have their quarterback in place. What do they want to do? It's going to be tough. The one that makes the most sense, unarguably, is the Bears at 9. But there's certainly going to be plenty of teams that are going to want to make a move with the Bears, I would say. Because the Bears are the only team in the top 10 with 2 picks. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows that they might be the most willing to move off of their current 9 pick. And anybody wanting to move up is probably going to be targeting in on Chicago. Just checking out Twitter real quick. So Sam Monson of PFF posted this, and it's discussing essentially what we're talking about right now. This is what occurred for the Atlanta Falcons back in, I believe, 2011 to draft Julio Jones, who'd go on, of course, to be one of the best wide receivers of the last decade. Sam says, this is what it cost Atlanta to make the same kind of jump for Julio Jones that Buffalo would need to make for somebody like Neighbors. Atlanta went from 27 to 6, so the Bills are at 28. So basically the same slot Atlanta was in at the time. It kind of worked out, but the guy basically has to be Julio Jones. That's the key. That's what I was saying earlier. If it works out, I mean, you don't hear any Atlanta Falcons fans bitching about what they gave up for Julio Jones, right? You never heard that. I mean, at one point with Julio Jones, the Atlanta Falcons had one of the best offenses in NFL history. And Matt Ryan won an MVP. But it has to be that good. Because if it's not that good, then it's all you're going to hear. That's the pressure that Brandon Beane's currently under. Here's what was made. Here was the move that was made. The Falcons traded the Cleveland Browns their 2011 first-round pick, their 2011 second-round pick, their 2011 fourth-round pick, the following year's first-round pick, and the following year's fourth-round pick. So they gave up 5 total picks, 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and 2 fourth-round picks. Falcons go up to 6. They draft Julio Jones. I mean, it's very well said by Sam. It kind of worked out, but the guy basically has to be Julio Jones. That's the only way to look at it. If the Bills move up and they get Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors in 5 years from now, we're talking offensive player of the year awards, on the cusp of that. We're talking routine 1,000-yard years, routine 100 plus catch years. No one's going to give 2 damns about what the Bills gave up. But if you move up and he's Juju Smith-Schuster, you're screwed. But that's the NFL for you, folks. 'Tis the league. What are your thoughts on the amount given up here? Would you give up that amount to move up into the top 10 to get a Neighbors or an Odunze? I'll tell you, man. Kevin's coming in saying, I'm a Beane hater. But props to him for shaking things up. I mean, this has been one of the most insane off seasons of my life. Certainly the most insane since I've been doing YouTube here. Coming up on 4 or 5 years of the smoke break, which is crazy. This is definitely the craziest off season that I've witnessed. I mean, up until that point, the craziest thing was the Von Miller move, which looking back on it, I mean, how hilarious was that we got excited over that? Especially to the extent of the excitement that we had over that. I mean, embarrassing. But this is the biggest offseason, the most crazy offseason, but for far different reasons. It's because it's not due to the fact that the Bills added somebody. All of the craziness in recent memory was because the Bills added LaShawn McCoy. The Bills added Cole Beasley. The Bills added Stefon Diggs, right? The Bills added Von Miller. This is craziness for a whole different reason. This is because the Bills have literally moved on from just about everyone you could have imagined in regard to players that seem to be towing the line, whether it be age, whether it be cap situation, and whether it be this Diggs situation where, I mean, I wonder if we ever find out anymore about what exactly, I mean, what happened? What happened? I mean, Allen seems like a guy that everyone would want to play for if you're on an offense. And Diggs was he had a great run in Buffalo. Like, what happened exactly? I'm not talking speculation. I'm not talking whatever. Like, what was it? And Sleepy Glacier saying people have things twisted because Josh Allen had nothing to do with this decision at all. I mean, we don't know what had anything to do with this situation. Sleepy Glacier. That's the thing I'm wondering as we sit here. I mean, you would think it didn't, but we don't know. We have no idea. That's what's so insane about this whole thing. Like, we have some tweets. We have some pictures of Diggs standing, watching the Chiefs celebrate the AFC, or watching them celebrate the AFC championship. We have pictures of Diggs, hands up in the air. We have a couple of tweets. We got a couple of sound bites and interviews. We don't have anything concrete. But boy, were we sold a bill of goods in regard to his status in Buffalo. Over the last year, we were sold a bill of goods. We were essentially told nothing to see here. I bought into it. I'm sure so many of you guys did too. And there's half of me that wonders, it's like, were we sold a bill of goods? Or was this in front of our face the whole time and we were just being completely naive? I think it might honestly be a mix of both. Let's see what Joe Mixon had to say. Everybody's saying that he was the one who essentially confirmed that Diggs requested wanting out. The hell is Diggs? What is Joe Mixon's Twitter even? Keep seeing like fake Twitters. Okay, here we go. I'm not seeing anything. I'm on Joe Mixon's Twitter. I'm not seeing anything about him talking about Diggs at all. Oh, nope, found it. Here we go. Joe Mixon tweets, just a few weeks ago, you asked and we delivered. Now let's go get these rings. I just thought the fan base loved him. I thought Josh Allen loved him. I thought that they treated him seemingly right. I thought that he had a great run in Buffalo and things were, I know things weren't the best at the end of the year last year, but we looked at the beginning of the year, things were going great. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words. All I know is that Diggs did this exact same thing in Minnesota. And when you get to the point where you have multiple examples of the same situation almost, is it the situation or is it the person that's routinely involved in said situation? Is it the outside factors or is it the person allegedly being affected by these outside factors? Because Diggs is the common denominator in both of those moves. Frankly, it sounds a bit more of it's a bit more of a Diggs problem than I think it is anybody else's problem. My boys Judge and Tilt, by the way, got put up on Old Takes Exposed. If you haven't seen, Judge made it seem like that was a lifetime accomplishment for him, which, by the way, I'd probably feel the same way. It's pretty cool to be put on Old Takes Exposed. You got to be pretty strong in your convictions to be that wrong and then get put up on there. We were all wrong. Where is it? There it is. Judge and Tilt on Old Takes Exposed. Judge, who pretty much runs the Twitter account, Judge said, every national media personality who tells you they think Stefon Diggs won't be a Buffalo Bill next year is showing you how uneducated they are about the game they cover. The Bills aren't closing a window and eating all that dead cap. I mean, I can't. Well, who would blame Judge and Tilt for this tweet? Did we not all feel the same way? This is why I feel so stupid. Like, we all felt this way. And I think rightfully so. Like, the point Judge makes here is so spot on. The Bills aren't moving off of their number one receiver, essentially what he's saying here. And the Bills aren't eating $31 million in dead cap to do it. Like, does that not seem logical to you? The logic behind this never led to Diggs leaving Buffalo. And that's why it feels so illogical today. He ate it with grace, though, by the way, Judge. He said, oh, hell yes, I'll eat my crow. A lifelong dream has been fulfilled. Yeah, pretty cool to get up on the Old Takes Exposed, I suppose. Thad Brown talking about trading up to the 9 pick, which is what we were talking about earlier. That's the Browns pick, and that's the highest I see the Bills getting. Right outside or inside of the top 10. Likely cost for a Bills trade to 9th pick. First and second this year, first next year. Could possibly make it a second instead of first next year with a handful of day 3 picks. Bears at 9 might be open to quantity over quality. Interesting, but you also have to wonder, like what we mentioned earlier, there are several other teams you got to feel like that will be in the race. The Bears might not be willing to sacrifice in any sort of capacity if there's more on the table from other teams. I mean, they have no. What do they care where that pick goes? They're going to take the best. They're going to take the best available offer. I would do. The Bills have 11 picks. They don't have a 3rd round pick, but they have 11 picks. If one of these teams, if the Bears would be willing to take a bunch of day 3 picks, the Bills have them. First and a second this year, first next year. It's a lot. It's a lot, but I don't know. I'd consider it, man. That's where they're at. Has Brandon Beane spoken yet, or has anybody spoken on this one? Has anybody spoken on this yet? Is there? I don't know if there's a press conference for this or not. I mean, I feel like there should be. At 4 p.m. All right, I'll stick around till 4 so we can watch it together. This is funny. As toxic as Twitter can be, at least it's absolutely hilarious as well. All right, yeah. According to John Scott and all you lovely people in the comments, Brandon Beane will speak today at 4 p.m. It's 3:35, so we'll hang out till then. Pierre. Pierre never turns down an opportunity to say, remember who we have. Never. Ever, ever, ever. Oh, my gosh. This is always fun. Let's go to the comment section of the official Bills Twitter and see how that went. Oh, it's not nearly as fired up as I thought it would be. Man. When you recap the last month of this organization's moves, this has been a wild ride. I mean, there's ripping the Band-Aid off, and then there's like having a full-on cast. And you just rip the cast off. This is what this has felt like. This is far beyond ripping off a Band-Aid. Hold on one second. I got to send off an email. This is all happening in the middle of work. I can't believe I woke up to this shit today. Look at the Diggs. Look at the Diggs bobblehead. I mean, this was the Bills, man. I mean, he was such a staple. I'm looking around here. You got the two action figures here, the bobblehead here. I mean, hell, he's Diggs' little person here, right? There he is with Allen and McDermott. Quite an ironic look today. They're still trapped in this bubble right here, and you know, Diggs is begging to get out of it. Got the Funko Pop right there. I mean, it's just it's Diggs City. It's Diggs Central. You know what's crazy now? Who's the big household name on the Bills now outside of Josh Allen? Think about it. Who's the household name for the casual NFL fan now on the Bills? I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. Can you think of one? I don't think they have one. I mean, yeah, I'm seeing Kincaid, I'm seeing James Cook, but you guys got to remember, like, we're diehard Bills fans. I'm talking about the guy or the gal who tunes in week one and just watches. John Brown saying Von Miller, that might be the best answer, but the problem is Von Miller's played so little for the Bills, probably a lot of people who forget he's even playing. I mean, Brandon's saying that all over. I mean, this is the thing. You guys got to remember, a lot of these guys are not household names. As much as they feel like they should be, they're not. Like everybody's saying Milano. Milano is not a household name, even though he damn well freaking should be. I mean, Milano, you know how long it took for Milano to get the respect that he inevitably deserved? getting all pro last year. J Dub says Osiris Torrance. I mean, this is the first thing I thought of when the Giants moved on from Saquon. It's like, you don't have a franchise player. You don't have a face to the team. I mean, obviously, Allen is such a star that it outshines any real need to have that second aspect. But, you look around the league, of course, with the Chiefs, it's Mahomes and Kelsey. With the Eagles, it was Jason Kelsey, it's A.J. Brown, it's Devontae Smith, it's Jalen Hurts, right? With the Bengals, it's Jamar Chase, it's Joe Burrow. I mean, so many of these teams. The Bills do not have that anymore. In all honesty, Kevin, saying Damar Hamlin, that might be it. Damar Hamlin might be the answer. A lot of people know Damar Hamlin, of course, because of the unfortunate situation that occurred a year ago. That might be the answer. Jeff's asking my dad. He's asking me how I feel. He's asking me if my dad has given his thoughts on this yet. He was one of the missed calls I had when I woke up. He was the first person I called. He didn't know what to make. I'll tell you what, my dad is really good at his bullshit meter is very, very, very good. He can detect the BS very, very diligently. He had kind of had enough of Diggs' shit well before anybody else did. He kind of saw the writing on the wall here, believe it or not, where I think me and a lot of other people, we weren't necessarily pleased with the constant ambiguity surrounding his status and his tweets and all this, but we never thought it would come to this. He had kind of had enough of it before everybody else. Maybe just because he's an older guy, I don't know, a lot less tolerant in regard to social media shit and whatever else, but he's like all of us now. He's kind of in a state of shock. And the weird thing to me here is that, have you ever been more shocked over something that shouldn't be this shocking? That's what a lot of that is probably the weirdest yet best way to summarize this offseason so far. Everything that has occurred, when you really look at it, is not shocking, but it feels so shocking nonetheless. Jordan Poyer leaving, it felt shocking even though it wasn't. It was just shocking in the sense that it's actually happening. Tre'Davious White, same deal. It wasn't shocking that after 2 season-ending injuries and his cap situation that he was moved on from. But it felt shocking when he was moved off nonetheless. The Mitch Morse one felt as shocking as any of them, just because I don't think that was really talked about much. The Gabe Davis one, it didn't feel shocking, especially after his Instagram post about 2 weeks before the move. But you still felt shocked at the time, right into the window of free agency, he's gone. And you feel you're in a state of shock wondering what's the plan at wide receiver. And now this, it feels super shocking because of one, when it happened. There's not really a whole lot going on in the NFL right now. This is just pre-draft time, and that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot going on right now other than discussing what's going to happen in the draft. This is shocking for a variety of reasons, but at the end of the day, when we're in here now 2.5 hours, this happened probably 5 hours ago now. You got some time to digest it, and how shocking is it? We had all of the reasons. We had all of the tidbits lined up to prepare us for this moment. And I think the vast majority of this fan base, the vast majority of those like myself who do YouTube or whatever else, the vast majority of the mainstream media, I'm not talking mainstream media, and better way to put it would be like beat reporters and whatnot in the Buffalo area. I'm not talking about like ESPN and whatnot. But I felt like the vast majority of people like me, like content guys, beat reporters, and local news personnel, the fan base, the majority of that was all in a collective agreement that no matter what he's saying on Twitter, no matter what he's saying in this interview or that interview, he's not going anywhere. But when he's gone, now that he's gone, and you look back at all of the things that led up to it, I'll tell you this. I've lost a lot of trust overall, I guess, when it comes to reading between the lines on certain things. I don't know how you guys feel, but the next time something like this happens, I'm going to look at it far more critically than I did with this situation. The more you think about it, the more we should have known this exact same thing happened in Minnesota, and that's the reason he was a Buffalo Bill in the first place. This really was a carbon copy of that situation. Obviously, certain elements of it are different, but it's essentially the same thing with the same outcome. Zoyak saying we needed to get cheaper and younger. This is what needed to happen. It is what needed to happen. Moving off from Diggs is not what needed to happen, though. The moving off of Poyer and Tre'Davious White and Mitch Morris and Gabe Davis, all fair arguments for that point, for sure. This, to me, isn't part of that. I mean, this isn't any cheaper for the Bills this year. They're paying $31 million of his contract to not be on the team. This was not a cap casualty. This was not a must-make move for Brandon Beane. This was a my hands are tied. He doesn't want to be here type move to me. You let me know in the comments. What do you think? What do you think was the final nail in the coffin for this? Or do you think there was one? Do you think that this was just an inevitability all along and we just didn't see it? Do you think that Beane has known this for a while and has been looking for a trade partner for a bit now? Well, like Bravato's saying, like, why today of all days? This is what I'm wondering. Was this in the works for a while and today's just the day it happened? Or was this something that just came out of nowhere over the weekend or yesterday or on Monday and it happened today? Dagma saying Beane and Diggs had a chat. Diggs wanted out. That's simple. Certainly, probably the most logical takeaway. But when you are Brandon Beane, a guy wanting out, you almost got to, part of you's got to be like, hey, tough shit. We got you under contract here, my man. I mean, the situation was so bad. It couldn't have just been Diggs walking up to Brandon Beane having a nice civil conversation saying, hey, man, I want out. And Brandon Beane saying, okay, I'll find you a way to get out. When you got that much money tied up to it, when you have the compensation you get in return for it, which isn't a whole hell of a lot, and when you see the team he goes to, I personally would feel a bit better about this if I woke up today and this exact move was made, but with the Arizona Cardinals, the Carolina Panthers, the Washington Commanders, the Minnesota Vikings. I'd feel a bit better about it. The fact that he's going to a team that pretty much, unless something major happens, pretty much seems like they're going to be a staple in the AFC for quite some time. That, to me, is one of the more jarring elements of this. And it adds to the confusion surrounding the move itself. Because not only are you eating that $31 million, not only do you only get a second-round pick in return, not that I think anybody was going to cough up a hell of a lot more, but when you wrap all that together with the bow that is the Houston Texans being one of the more talented up-and-coming teams in your conference, and a team that all but inevitably will be fighting for playoff seeding alongside of you, That's what makes it even more head-scratching. I mean, we looked at that Texans roster earlier. That is a no-joke roster with no money being paid to the majority of guys on that team. And as J-Dub is saying, and I keep losing this element as well, the second-round pick next year, they can't even use the pick that's coming their way this year. Maybe you'd feel a bit better about it if you could use that second pick this year, and you could really make the argument that the Bills will be able to double dip at the wide receiver position in the first and second round with an additional second-round pick. The Bills could take a wide receiver in round 1, take another wide receiver in round 2, as well as another position of need, whether that be safety, D-line, whatever, as well in the second round. Cody's saying our window isn't closed, but it's more of a sunroof now. So I'm guessing, Cody, you're saying the sunroof analogy being it's on an automatic movement where it can stay open, but it can move awfully quickly, and it can close on a dime by hitting a button. Or maybe the analogy is it's closed, but you can still see through it. Maybe it seems closed, but in actuality, it isn't. I've been so torn on this statement that everyone tosses around all the time that the window will always be open with Josh Allen. It depends on how you define the window. Will the Bills always be competitive with Josh Allen? Yes. But will the Bills always be in the Super Bowl window with Josh Allen? That's going to depend on what's around him. No matter how great you are, you still have to have the elements surrounding you in order to capitalize on that greatness. That's why what the Chiefs are doing is such a mind F. Because the last 2 championships they've had, especially this last season, they were not the better team on paper. In each of the last 2 Super Bowls, not only were the Chiefs underdogs, but deservingly so, in my opinion. They had a worse roster than the Philadelphia Eagles. They had a worse roster than the San Francisco 49ers. They won both. But they're the only team that's really done that. Austin Ellis is saying Ayuk or T. Higgins would be a great move for us. So if you missed me, Austin, earlier and often I've been saying this about T. Higgins as this has become more of a prominent talking point ever since he's requested a trade. I just don't see the Bengals willing to make a move with a team like the Bills. I don't see them giving one of their best assets to a team that they know is in direct competition with them for the AFC. But, I mean, crazier things have happened. I would have said the Bills wouldn't trade Stefon Diggs within the AFC. Not only do they do that, but they give him to one of the more up-and-coming teams in the league. But I just don't see, one, do they move off of Higgins at all? I mean, they don't have to. But 2, if they do, I just feel like it would be a crazy idea to think that the Bengals would be willing to move him to a team that will be in direct competition with the Bills for the top end of the AFC for the foreseeable future. Ayuk's certainly a possibility. They're currently at a standstill right now in contract negotiation. Brandon Ayuk is a phenomenal wide receiver. I love him, and I would love having him in Buffalo. But he's at a crossroads right now with San Francisco in regard to a contract. The Bills would have to pony up. And it just feels like the Bills would be better suited to make a major move in the draft than they would to make a major move on a guy like Brandon Ayuk. Because if you make a major move in the draft, you don't have to pay that guy for 4 or 5 years. If you make a major move on Brandon Ayuk, not only are you going to have to give up probably similar type draft capital to what you'd have to give up to move up in the draft. Maybe not as much, but certainly a substantial amount. Not only would you have to do that, you'd have to pay him top market value that he's asking for, that he's currently not getting in San Francisco. So with that in mind, my mindset switches back to the draft once again. Both saying Ayuk makes zero sense to me. I don't see it happening. If a major move is going to be made, it's going to be made in the draft. Cody's saying Chiefs, number 1, Ravens, number 2, Texans, number 3, Bills, number 4, Bengals, number 5. Dagma is saying Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals, Texans, Bills at 5. The Bills are still right out there. I mean, folks, you have to also understand this. The Bills had a down year last year, and they were the 2 seed in the AFC East champion with a missed throw on the final drive away from potentially moving on to the AFC championship. So I can't knock them down. I can't knock them down the totem pole a whole hell of a lot. I mean, last year was not a good year for these Bills, and they still weathered the storm to the tune of a 2 seed, home playoff games, and an AFC East championship. Brandon Beane's going to speak in 4 minutes here, and we're going to watch it live and see what he has to say about the situation. My guess is we don't get a whole hell of a lot. I hope he gets some tough questions coming his way, but I'm sure we're going to get a lot of politically correct answers. Austin Ellis saying Ayuk or Higgins would be phenomenal. I mean, it would be. It would be, but I don't see it. Dagma saying drinking game starting in 3 minutes. What are the rules, Dagma? What are we taking shots for? How do we watch? I'm going to play it on here. I'm hoping it's on Twitter. That's where I'm currently looking. I'm going to play it on here. We're going to react to it in real time. They usually do their press conferences live on Twitter, so. My best friend Plank saying, Texans fan here. Love the channel. Been subbed for a while. Love that. Much love to you, my best friend Plank, and congrats to you on adding Stefon Diggs to an already incredibly talented and young Houston Texans offense. Let me know real quick, by the way, my best friend Plank, your thoughts on getting Stefon Diggs in for your team. What was your initial reaction? What was the initial reaction of the Texans fan base? How excited are you? I'm guessing you guys got to be through the roof stoked here. Dagma says we got to take a shot. If Beane says it's the right thing to do, best for both parties. Yeah, we're gonna definitely hear. That's a good one. Best for both parties is definitely one I can foresee being said here. All right, we're 1 minute away. I'm getting ready to load this up wherever it pops up. If you see it before me on Twitter, let me know where to go to, whether it's the Buffalo Bills PR account or the Buffalo Bills main account. Cody's saying, I'd say it's good to have during an eclipse. And we're 5 days removed from the big eclipse, aren't we? Imagine Beane and drop this info like the second the eclipse hit. I know in Rochester, the eclipse is supposed to be like a total blackout for like 5 minutes or so. My mom said that like every hotel in Rochester is sold out. I know a ton of businesses are closing up too. Down where I'm at in Connecticut, we're not supposed to get much for the eclipse. But I know Rochester is supposed to like be a complete blackout for like 4 minutes or so. Not seeing a stream up yet for the Beane press conference. Cody says Buffalo's a full blackout too. Okay, cool. I didn't know that. Yeah, I know it's pretty rare for this obviously to be happening. It's like a once a century type thing, but it's really cool that it's happening in the Buffalo Rochester area. Like that makes it even more rare. It's freaking awesome. Am I going to play the press conference? Yes, I'm looking for it. I don't see it anywhere yet. Okay, here we go.
You're doing it. You're trying to win, and sometimes people may not see that. This is by no means the Bills giving up or trying to take a step back or anything like that. Everything we do, we're trying to win, and we're going to continue to do that. It's April. It's April the 3rd or 4th, whatever it is, and we'll continue to work on this roster and make sure we're ready to play come September.
After spending the offseason really getting out of salary cap heck, you add what could potentially, according to reports, $31 million to your salary cap this upcoming season. For some, it seems that this was a parting of ways, a necessary parting of ways, that you couldn't wait until next year, that perhaps Stefon had worn out as well. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, I think we just want to get into appreciating when we had Steph here, the years we did. And again, you don't want to get into every reason you make every move. It's not one thing with any player. We've traded other players here. We've acquired players, him being one. Everything you do, you think is the best decision. And you make it, you weigh the pros and the cons of every decision like this. And we don't take it lightly, but you're always making it in the best interest of the Bills. And that's what we're trying to do here. And, we made the move.
Did Diggs' camp ask to be traded?
And no, I would like to leave it that, we've always had good discussions. Adisa, Bakari's agent, very good relationship with Adisa. I've known him for a number of years. Very good agent, and he and I've always had a great relationship about everything. So, and that's continued every year that Steph's been here, and I'm sure it'll continue as long as we have any players that he represents here going forward. That's probably the best way I would like to leave it.
So yes.
What changed from those 2 years ago to now?
A lot can change in 2 years. Anything. I mean, you just look at rosters, Catherine, from 3 years ago.
I mean, come on.
To now. Look who was on our roster. Look at you're always doing what you think you need to do at the time. Whether it's getting his deal up to the market. The receiver market drastically changed that year when we did that move. And so, he was coming off, another all-pro season. And, at the time, we felt the timing was right to do that. But a lot of things can change with a number of players in 2 years or 3 years.
It's like getting a divorce. And it's like, what changed between the day of the wedding and now? A lot can change. Well, yeah, but clearly something bad happened,
If you're going to move a player, there can be plenty of times it's not the first time we've been called to ask, would we move him, even prior to this year, but you discuss it, when you get calls, and there's been plenty of players that have been called and got moved that we discussed and just felt like that wasn't the right time or that wasn't the right value. I think with this move, as we're talking with, Houston in this case, the last couple of days was, the value seemed to make sense. The timing made sense, for them and for us. And we worked.
All right.
on
So
the
you said the
deal.
last couple of days. So they've been talking about it for the last couple of
The
days.
timing made sense.
What do you mean the timing?
Like you said, the timing made sense for the move.
The timing is the value that you're being offered for the player versus what you think is fair, and you're always looking not only at this year, but you're always looking in future years as well. So you have to.
This tells me
all
that they did not have much else being offered
Coach's
their
job,
way.
let's just say, is to win every practice.
If this is the value that made the most
I want
sense, there was
to,
clearly no other
but
value
part of
being
my
offered
job is
anywhere
to
else.
Also keep an eye on what it is, and I think we all know what we walked into this year, this league year, with the salary cap and where we were. And while yes, we'll eat a little bit this year, it frees over $20 million off of our cap and gives us some more flexibility in the future.
How would you describe the relationship between Stefon and the organization at the time you guys made this trade?
I don't think any. I would say the similar to last year or probably year before. I don't think there's nothing any different. Steph kind of does his thing. He does the fashion
I'm not
stuff.
buying any of this.
I know he's been back training back in the U.S. I would say in the offseason,
he's dodging just about everything.
A lot more. Good morning, Steph and I did great conversation, as if he had just walked out of here, yesterday or day before. So very good conversation.
At that point, there were, you were always staunchly defending his passion and his fire on the field. Did any of that end up at that end of this decision? Just kind of, there was perceived discontent sometimes with there. It feels like every offseason we kind of went through this cycle. Was that a factor?
I would say, Catherine, I think as I was saying earlier, like you're always putting everything into there, but Steph's a very competitive guy, and I wouldn't want to change. That, and I don't think that was something that when we acquired him, I think we were very aware of his competitive nature. But yeah, again, when you make a decision like this, it's generally, unless someone broke the law and did something very bad, and it's generally not one thing. You're making the decision, and you're considering all factors. You're getting different people's viewpoints. You're weighing all the pros and cons. It's not like there's all pros to doing it and zero cons. And obviously we did the move, so it's not all cons and no pros. You're looking at everything. You weigh it.
Finally, they got the audio.
Is it easy? Is it easy? Heck no. It's hard. Sometimes in this seat, you got to make difficult decisions. And what I would, let everyone know is it's not lightly. It wasn't easy, but it was with a lot of thought, discussion, conversation, at the highest levels of our organization. And it was made what we believe was the best interest of the Bills. And I don't think we can go around and around. I don't think I could frame it any better. Certain things need to be kept in house, how a decision was made or what all factors specifically. I think you just have to trust that this decision was made in the best interest of the Bills going forward.
Did you talk to Josh prior to the move? Have you talked to him since the move? And I would guess what are those conversations?
Good question.
I've not talked to him since the move. No, he was on the West Coast, so it probably woke up to, whenever that move went down, he might have been asleep. But I'll circle back with him. But, Josh and I have a pretty regular conversation on things. And I think it's important for me to make sure if I think something could happen to make sure he's not blindsided. And so I would.
All right, so he definitely ran it by
without going into the discussion.
I don't think he took
the last time we spoke was.
He didn't take his opinion on it. I think he just kind of probably let him know.
There had been some inquiries, and it wasn't 100% off the table.
Impactful pass been Diggs to Josh's success in the past 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, they've been really good duo. You'd have to. I mean, I don't remember. I don't think Steph made an All-Pro before he got here, and he made multiple and some Pro Bowls in there too. And Josh ramped up as well. So I do think when they were when they were clicking, the games they were clicking, or the seasons they were really clicking, you could say they were probably up there with most any quarterback receiver.
When did Houston reach out and vice versa to start this, and when did it really get serious?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it got serious. You know, there's always dialogue with different teams reaching out. I would say it probably got serious this week. Yeah, not before.
As a follow-up, he was a high value target. How much confidence do you have in the group of Shakir, Samuel, Kincaid, and Knox to capitalize on these opportunities?
Someone's going to ask about the
Yeah,
draft.
I think it's, you know, the years that Steph's been here, he's clearly been our one, right? I think we can all agree to that. I think it's more of a volume, you know, a variety of guys. We obviously, I'm not standing up here today saying, look, I've got another one to walk in the door, and we know we're still working through the cap. So, you know, from an expectation standpoint, I wouldn't anticipate, you know, I'm going to walk in here the next week and say, look what we've got. I think we do have a lot of confidence in our offense, in the other players, whether it's receivers, the two tight ends you mentioned, the backs. And listen, we don't play games until September. You know, I would hope you know by now I'm going to turn over every stone, and our staff is to continue to look to add depth and competition to all those rooms, so that when it's time to play, that we have a team we're proud of and that's going to go out there and give us a chance to win.
His role in the offense from a leadership standpoint, obviously, you know, we would talk to him about what he's telling DB, special teams. He's one of 6 captains to now be gone this offseason. What does this mean kind of from like a leadership standpoint, a chemistry
6
standpoint?
captains.
He's had that kind of role for the team too.
Yeah, you know, that's a good question about the leadership, Catherine. It's is due to, you know, some of the business make even prior to this one. It is going to look different, the C's on the chest next year, and it's a good opportunity though. I know from my time in Carolina, there were, you know, a Luke Kuechly and a Cam Newton weren't looked in those roles, and they ascended in those roles, and some of the young players. And so, yes, you're constantly evolving your roster and your team. And so just like those guys had a chance when they were younger to get the C on their chest, whether it was, you know, Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse, and those guys, it's an opportunity for some others to step up. And I think, you know, coach and the locker room will be watching, starting with the offseason program, who's leading, who's going to take over in some of these position rooms, who's going to, you know, we know Josh is going to, you know, probably the tip of the spear, but, you know, who's going to kind of marry along with him the way some of these other guys did. But it'll be a great opportunity. And, you know, we believe we have some young leaders on this team that will have the opportunity to show that they're ready for that, you know, that C.
Navigate the next few weeks with other people knowing in the league that you're.
Dude, what do they got going on over there?
Necessarily be coy about it in a way. Like everybody kind of knows that you just said you're losing your wide receiver one for the last several years. So how do you approach that?
No, I mean, we'll just there's still veterans out there. We'll still look and see if there's someone that would fit, and then we'll do the same, Matt. We'll grade our draft board, put it up there. We'll put them in the order we see them at. If you're talking about just receiver position, we'll have those lined up. You know, we're not gonna at 28. You know, if all our first round receivers are gone and the next guy is well into the second round, but we have other positions, we're going to take the other position. Like we're not, you still got to take good football players. And even if we don't get the player that everyone is looking for in April, it doesn't mean there's not other ways to do it. We have to remember the roster building is always continuing, and we need to make sure this team's ready to go when we get done with training camp, and that's the goal. Would you love to have all 90 guys as soon as the draft's over, ready to roll, and that's all you're doing? That's probably be easier.
It's not like he's going to tell us anything valuable.
It usually doesn't work that way. Sometimes after the draft, someone drafts a high receiver, if you're talking about that, and they're like, you know what, we could we can go cheaper there. Let's move on from this guy. And so we'll
I would have
continue
loved
to
to have
monitor
heard though
even
that it's a
after the draft, no matter
priority.
what happens in the
But I
draft.
think that goes
We'll
without
continue
saying.
to monitor who's available now, who's available after the draft. And again, maybe it's at other positions too. It's about making our offense the most dynamic we can, and we'll continue to work to do that.
Why was a future pick the more attractive option as opposed to a pick?
Well, I mean, I would love to have gotten a great pick this year. But, you know, I think you have to look at what
There was nothing on
how
the
teams
table.
value.
There was
whatever you're trying
nothing
to
on the
trade.
table for
And,
Diggs.
that
He just
was
said,
the
"I would
best
love to
move
have
for us. That
gotten."
was the most value. And it was a value that we thought made sense.
He just
for us.
said
I
the
think
most
it's
value they could
when
have
you
gotten
get
was a
this
second
close
round
to
for
the
next year.
draft, Joe. I mean, we're talking a few weeks away.
So this
People have done a lot of work.
this
It
move
becomes
was made
harder and harder
for the just to get him out of the
move on
building.
from
There's
this
no other way to
year.
look at it.
I think it's easier for someone because they know, man, I got 12 months to work on refilling that pick. So I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
Totally get what you're talking about in the future years, but as fans kind of work through the emotions of this, like fans of Stefon for the last 4 years, what would you say to them if they ask, how are you better in 2024 with him on the roster, still counting against your cap in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, are we better today? Probably not. Yeah, it's a work in progress, and we're going to continue to work on that.
Honest.
I would just hope that people know I'm as competitive as hell, and I ain't giving in, and we're gonna work through this.
It feels like he was
and we're gonna
really backed
continue to
into a
look,
corner
and
here, doesn't it?
I'm confident in the guys we have on the roster, and I'm confident, the staff we have upstairs that helps me, that we'll continue to find pieces to add, and that we'll be ready to roll when it comes time in September.
Just to clarify the salary cap situation, so all this falls on this year's salary cap, and
It's John, it's basically adding, it's adding, we were roughly before this move, 7.5 million, something like that on the cap. This is going to take off 3.3. There'll be a little offset, which will get maybe closer to 4 by the time you add a player back on, whenever that is. But so it pulls us down into the 3s of cap space. And so we don't have a lot of room. We will get money back in June when Tre'Davious is, I think that's 10-2 or 10-3. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. But yeah, we'll still have to save money for the draft picks, replacement cost, practice squad, guys like that. But yeah, we'll be creative. We're still going to look. It's the cap flexibility is more next year, which can help you even in the following year, depending on what you do or you don't do in 25.
Given that you didn't know for sure whether or not you were going to trade Steph, but him being such an important player, how were you able to mesh your offseason plans in terms of building the roster on the?
Dude, they gotta get their tech department figured out.
And the captaincy and the whole thing. How are you able to get started back, 6 weeks ago, and still try to maneuver in case this happens, and being as prepared as possible, or if he's still on the roster in September?
Yeah, well, I think you're weighing both. I think it was very important for us to add a couple guys. Matt Collins is a veteran guy. I know he's not been a one, but he's played meaningful snaps and had some good seasons, especially when he was with the Raiders with Derek Carr, one of the better quarterbacks he played with. Curtis Samuel, we've talked about him before. So we did try and add some pieces that would, if we didn't trade Steph, would still mesh with him, different skill sets. And but also with the flexibility, knowing that if we did do the move, at this time, we'd have to hold enough space.
So he's saying this was a possibility for a
to
while.
do that. So that's at
least how I see it.
You plan for everything, and you're always trying to make the best decision. And so I couldn't have told you a month ago we were definitively open to moving Steph, but
why are you open
we went
now?
through the
Why are
discussions
you
that I listed
open now?
earlier, and we got what we thought was the right value, and decided to pull the trigger.
January, this wasn't a situation from your perspective that you wanted to strip down and start all over, but with some of the moves you guys have made, moving on from a few veterans, now trading Diggs, does seem like maybe steps in that direction. How do you reconcile that statement with some of the moves you guys have made so far this offseason?
I would say it's not September, and I'm going to repeat that. And every team is a new team. Every year is a new year, and we haven't had the draft yet. And so I don't think it's fair to assess what the 2024 Bills are going to look like, right? And so it's April the 3rd, 4th, again, April the 3rd. We play in September. So let's be patient and let us work through this. Was it easy? No. But if you make the best decision for the Bills going forward, that's all you can do. You can trust that. And so this organization and our fan base needs to trust that we're going to trot out a damn good team come September. And that's our plan, and that's not changing.
Stefon Diggs, is there a possibility that you'll look to go younger and possibly draft multiple receivers this year?
Well, did you hear me on Pat McAfee? I said we're going to draft one in every round. You didn't hear that?
Not time for jokes, Double B.
He's a pretty good guy. In all seriousness, yeah, I mean, listen, you would love to say, hey, there's going to be a really good, number one receiver or number two, whatever it is, faulty in the draft, or, a veteran come available that you're like, that you can fit within your cap. So I think we'll continue to look at that. I think we could still add one of each or a couple. We're not done. And we may add at other positions in different ways. So we'll continue to look. And again, I would just say be patient. Let us work through this. And, we believe when it's time to play football, we'll have a team that can challenge the same way we've been challenging the last few years. Thank you. Okay.
And that's Brandon Beane at the podium talking about the Buffalo Bills moving off from Stefon Diggs. Let's talk about it. So what I take from that, there was at least an idea of them moving off of Diggs for some time now. At least a month, it was in the mind of Brandon Beane. No definitive stance as to whether or not they would do it, but it seems that at least about a month or so has been dedicated to the idea that this could have happened. He said that things did not really heat up until this week as far as the seriousness of a move is concerned. My guess is the Texans inquired a bit last week. They got into serious talks. It heated up this week, and they make a move. He said, quote, he would have loved to have he would have loved to have had a pick this year. That tells you that he did not get offered anything remotely close in value to what the Texans gave him for Diggs for this season, meaning he was not offered a second round for this year by Houston or any other team. He continuously mentioned that the value was what they were seeking, and that's why the move was made when it was made. That tells me, based on the value they got, which wasn't a whole hell of a lot, a second rounder for next year and a couple of late round picks, that tells me that there, one, wasn't a whole lot of offers on the table, if any more at all, and that this was just seemingly the best of a bad situation, and they went with it. From what I can tell, and he'd never give the answer, of course, but he was asked about the relationship. He said, oh, things change, within 2 years. From what I can tell, Diggs 100% asked for, if not demanded, a trade. What that entailed, we'll never know. But it sounds and looked like Brandon Beane was backed into a corner on this one. I feel like visibly from the body language, it felt and it just looked like this was something that he didn't want to do. From what he answered, it sounded like it was something that he didn't want to have to do. It felt as though it got to the point where it was something they absolutely had to do. He didn't give a direct answer surrounding the idea of Diggs demanding or asking for a trade, but based on the beating around the bush that was just displayed in that presser, it seems all but inevitable that Diggs was very adamant on getting out of there, put Brandon Beane in a corner. How so? We'll never know. Whether he said, I'm just not going to play, this and that. I'll tell you this, not good. It was bad. The bridge was far too gone to be rebuilt or amended or fixed. It was collapsed. It was just burnt down. And this is the move that Beane had to make. But I think what you take away from that is, one, there wasn't a whole lot on the table here. Why is another question to be had. Why there wasn't a lot on the table, who the hell knows? It seems as though what the Texans offered the Bills was as good as it was going to get, was as good as it got. That's why Brandon Beane took it. But I think more than anything, what we take away from that is that this was the doing of Stefon Diggs, not the doing of the organization and their desire to move off from him. It was Diggs' desire to get out of there. I think when you keep all the factors in mind, the dead cap money that has now been put on the plate of Brandon Beane, when you take into consideration the value they got for him, the timing in which it happened, it feels like things started happening real quickly. I don't know if the agent said something, Stefon Diggs said something, but doesn't it just feel like he informed the Bills that he does not want to be here and he has no intentions on playing for him? What would the outcome have been if Brandon Beane didn't make this move? That's the question. If no move was made and Brandon Beane stood tall on this and did not back down, would Diggs have sat? I mean, who knows? It just feels like things got so bad that this was really the only choice Brandon Beane had. It was to take the best offer available or go into this season with a very tumultuous relationship with Stefon Diggs. And I think if it's based on that, then Beane made the right move. I mean, you can sit here and knock Beane all you want on this. I don't know how much of a choice he was given here. That was probably, if I had to guess it, the reason this feels like it was so... The reason why this feels like it happened so fast, the reason why the value doesn't seem great, the reason why the Bills are eating $31 million in cap, I think it's because his options were get something for him or he's just not going to play for the team this year and it's going to be a fiasco. It's going to be an absolute mess. It's going to be a situation that's constantly talked about, constantly discussed, a distraction, you name it. So for all those reasons, Beane, in the situation he was placed in, the way that it is perceived by me at least, made probably the right decision here. A tough decision, a decision that really had no right answer. He probably did make what could be perceived as the most correct answer in this dilemma. I am dying to know, and we'll never know, I'm sure, but I am dying to know if things got dramatically worse over the last month, where Beane was saying about a month ago it wasn't certain as to whether or not they were going to move him. I'm wondering what happened over the course of this last month, what the final nail in the coffin was, what was the straw that broke the camel's back, because it certainly wasn't the Texans coming up with an offer that Brandon Beane couldn't refuse. That's not what this was. You could probably make that argument if the Texans came in and had a crazy offer for Diggs and Beane took it, maybe you could say, Beane wasn't going to see anything close to this again. It's clear that they needed to move on from him and he wanted out. They make the move. No, that's not what this is. Something surely had to have happened. Now he talks about Josh Allen's role in this whole thing. He said that he has routine discussions with Josh Allen. He informed Josh Allen that there were inquiries for Stefon Diggs, but he did not inform him, at least today, that the move was being finalized. He said that Josh Allen probably woke up on the West Coast to the news. The way I read it, I took it, he said that he didn't inform Josh Allen after the move. The way I perceived it, he said without saying that he probably gave Allen a heads up either early this week, maybe last week, or whenever things started to heat up. My guess is he probably gave Allen a heads up that this is getting serious and it's a very likely situation, or it's a very likely possibility that that Diggs could be moved. But he hadn't had any talk with him today about it. That looked like a guy who was put in a real tough spot, though, did it not? Just looking at Brandon Beane, hearing him, that felt and looked like a situation that he did not want to be a part of if it was up to him. I don't know. I don't know the leverage that Diggs had, but I guess the leverage to me would be I'm sitting. I mean, this is what Deshaun Watson did to the Texans. Deshaun Watson sat out on the Texans until they moved him, and they eventually moved him to the Browns. I mean, if a player's willing to stand on business and say, I'm not playing if you don't move me, I mean, they would have still have had to have paid him, right? Or whatever else. Would have benched him. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm just speculating at this point. But based on the compensation, based on the hit the Bills have to take, based on the situation that this puts them into, it feels like Diggs really backed them into a corner and Beane tried to salvage as much as he could from a bad situation. Tina Bills fan is saying that is the face he always has in body language. I mean, to a degree, yeah. Beane has a pretty good poker face, no question. But I based on the way he worded his answers when he was asked about Diggs asking out and whatever, and he said that he said he wants to keep that in house, that he doesn't want to divulge all of the details that went into it. To me, that pretty much says without saying that Diggs was the driving force behind this. And I feel like that went without saying. Before that press conference. Why would the Bills want to willingly take on $31 million in dead cap for a second round pick next year and lose a wide receiver one when they don't currently have one on the roster? Cody's saying, I have a master in body language. This presser was definitely something. It just felt like he did his best to give the answers that would get him out of the presser. Did his best to give the answers that would answer the questions, but not necessarily answer the questions. And we all know that GMs are masters at this. Any coach or quarterback worth their salt is masters at this. Being in that position, you got to be able to tell white lies at an elite level. You have to be able to say a whole lot without saying a whole lot at an expert level. And Brandon Beane certainly is capable of doing that. And I think that's what he just did right there. Obviously, in regard to the draft situation, it's not like Brandon Beane's going to sit there and say, yep, we fully intend on moving up in the first round. So everybody else in the league, get ready, know exactly what they're doing. So you can only take so much from that. He kept saying that he's going to look at the veteran presence out there. It's not September. The rosters aren't finalized until September. I mean, all of that stuff, it doesn't mean anything. He's never going to tell you what the plan is in the draft. He's never going to tell you what the plan is in the offseason in regard to signing guys. So that doesn't make much of a difference to me. But what I was looking for really is to try to get a vibe as to what happened leading up to this. And once again, to recap, just based on what I can take away from it, it feels as though the idea surrounding moving Diggs has been on the mind of this front office for at least a month. They were not fully ready to do so about a month ago. Within this month time span, something has changed in order for this move to be made on a dime, seemingly. He said things did not get serious with Houston until this week here. He made it seem like they discussed this over about a week's time, but things did not heat up until about right now or the last couple of days. He said that the value was what they both thought was fair. He basically said he was not offered anything for this current season in terms of a second round pick or anything better than that. He made it seem like the second round that they got next year was about as good of an offer as they got, and there wasn't much else on the table even close to it. And then above anything else, it just feels like Diggs was the primary driving force behind this, backed Brandon Beane and the team into a corner, and Beane wound up making the move that he felt was best for the Bills. He continuously kept saying, we have to make the move that's right, that's best for the Bills, that's best for the team. And it seems like when you get down to it, getting rid of Stefon Diggs is not the best move for the team. If you were to remove all of the outside factors and simply focus on football and football alone, in addition to the finances surrounding the situation, if you were to take all that into account, moving on from Stefon Diggs is not the best situation for the Buffalo Bills. So why does Beane say that they did this for really no other reason other than it being the best move for the Bills? Because it feels like keeping Stefon Diggs around would have been bad for the Bills. There's no other way to look at it. Because getting rid of your wide receiver one and eating $31 million off the cap in dead cap to do so for a second round pick doesn't seem like it's best for the franchise. But when you factor in that Diggs probably he could have either held out, he could have not played, he could have been a major distraction, he could have been constantly causing problems for this organization. When you take all that into consideration, yeah, it is the best move for the Bills to not have Stefon Diggs on the team. But man, oh man, does it not make you wonder what really led up to this point, man, to have been a fly on the wall at one Bills drive for the last couple of weeks, or at least maybe the last month. I would have loved to have seen when if the dial in which he was kind of alluding to, if the dial was on unsure, to the right is yes, make a move, to the left is no, we're not trading him, and in the middle is we're undecided. What was the primary factor that had Diggs, or that had Beane turn that dial to the right on Stefon Diggs? Funny enough, Stefon Diggs makes that tweet the other day, kind of a bit of a shot at Josh Allen and how good he might be without Diggs. It seems, based on Joe Mixon's tweet, where he said, you called me last week to try and get this done. Now it's done. Certainly, when Stefon Diggs made that tweet, what was it, Sunday night? Stefon Diggs certainly was aware that he was probably going to be moved, or there were talks about him being moved. I don't know. You know what? Sometimes it's pretty obvious that why things were bad, or why things are bad for a team or a player. I genuinely don't know in this situation what was so bad for Stefon Diggs. He was making top of the league money. He was playing with one of the best quarterbacks the league has seen in quite some time. Year in and year out with him on the roster, they had one of the best offenses in the league in terms of scoring and a variety of other stats. They were a perennial Super Bowl contender for the entirety of his duration in Buffalo. Multiple playoff wins, some bitter exits, but damn, they were right there. What was so bad? And how is it so much better in Houston? Like I said earlier, you understand maybe why he wanted out of Minnesota. Doesn't think Kirk Cousins is the solution. And as we saw it, and he never was in Minnesota, they moved off from him. He didn't think he was going to be winning anything substantial or making the playoffs routinely in Minnesota, perhaps, whatever. Wants out, wants to play with a different quarterback. He gets all of that. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. I'd love to be able to read Stefon Diggs' mind. What was the biggest problem? What happened that we don't know about? And who did it happen with? Did it happen with Allen? Did it happen with Brady? Did it happen with McDermott? Beane? Dorsey, perhaps? I also wonder how different would things have been if Diggs had better stats towards the end of the year? How different would things have been if Josh Allen hits Khalil Shakir on that deep crossing pattern in the end zone, doesn't get hit by Chris Jones, and they somehow beat the Chiefs in the divisional? Does all of this happen? Was it inevitable no matter what? Did that loss factor into it? There's so many questions. Brandon Beane also said that whether he was honest in this or not, we'll never know, but he said the relationship between him and Diggs hasn't really been any different over the last couple of years. So has this just been inevitable for 2 years now, and then finally this was the time to make the move? I don't know. All I can say is if I had to bet my life savings on whether Diggs was going to be a Bill or not this year, I would have bet my life savings on him being a Bill. This is the league, folks. Just when you think you got it figured out, you don't. Now that it's happened, you understand wholeheartedly why and how it happened. You don't know all the details, but it makes more sense. Looking back at all the things leading up to this, it makes sense. But did you ever really think it was going to come to this? It's going to take some time to digest for sure. The draft's 3 weeks from tomorrow. It is a pivotal draft. It is a major draft. It is a franchise-altering draft, perhaps, depending on how it is executed, depending how good of a job Brandon Beane does. But regardless, it's going to be franchise-altering in one way or another, in one direction or another. I don't see how it couldn't be. And I wonder where Josh Allen's at on this whole thing as well. And I wonder what he knew. I wonder what his relationship was like with Diggs towards the end. Is it safe to say it wasn't good? If Allen and Diggs' relationship was good, don't you think that this wouldn't have happened? Hard to have that mindset. But why wasn't it? What happened? I also wonder, say if it wasn't Houston, say if it was another team, like a team that's not nearly as good as Houston, would Diggs have left no matter what? Did Diggs just want out no matter where the destination was? Is that how much he wanted to be out of Buffalo? I see Brandon Beane getting clowned a lot on Twitter. We don't know the specifics. We can sit back here and say this is the worst move ever made. We can sit back and say, fire Brandon Beane. How do you make a move by this? I got a feeling, guys, Brandon Beane is no dummy. He's built this team into what it is. Brandon Beane didn't do this for the sake of doing this. You have to think he was put into an unescapable corner. There's no other way to conceive this. There's no other way to adequately digest what has happened without thinking Brandon Beane really had no other option. I mean, is it that inconceivable Is it that inconceivable to think that Diggs walked in there with his agent and said, look, you got two choices. Either you move us or we're not playing. I mean, we've seen it before. And with that potentially being on the table, what would you rather have? Would you rather have him gone and not have to deal with it and have a second round pick next year to show for it? Or would you rather have to deal with the bullshit that comes with him not playing or whatever else for the duration of this season, with you inevitably having to move off of him at some point? If Diggs wanted out that bad, it was either going to happen this year or next year. And I'm guessing Brandon Beane's just thinking to himself at this point, what's the difference? But no matter what Brandon Beane said in that presser, I think there's some things you can take away from it. There's some things you can take away that just seemed inevitable. The one thing that he'll never show his hand on is what the plan is. There's no way he doesn't have a plan. There's no way he doesn't have a plan. And he was honest. Are we better today? Probably not. That's what he said. And he's right. But I'm competitive as hell and I ain't giving in. And that's all we can rest our laurels on right now. I have faith in the guy. I know a lot of you do too. I understand the reasonings behind maybe not having as much faith in him as you used to. But you better be damn aware of the fact that if Brandon Beane was moved on from the Bills, there are, I couldn't even tell you the amount of organizations that would make the phone call to put him in place at the GM within a moment's notice. He's got a blank canvas now, and he's got time and a draft to work with. This could be a forgotten entity 8 months from now, depending on how this draft goes. Maybe a bit longer than that if it takes a while for things to shake out in one way or another. I'm so torn between the part of me that says, you should have saw it coming, and the part of me that says you really shouldn't have. But man, I'll never not want to know what happened. And hopefully there's maybe down the line, sometimes this happens. Hopefully an insider gets a scoop from somebody or something. I just would love to know. And then my thought on Diggs, man, like, I got nothing. I don't know why this had to happen for him. I don't know. I can't make an adequate. I can't feel one way or the other on it in a permanent fashion without knowing the precise details, and we'll never know it. But from the outside looking in, didn't things seem pretty good? Was it much better than, outside of being in Kansas City, did it get much better than being a Buffalo Bill the last 6 years or so? Richie Fresh saying fans acting like we're going to go another 17-year drought. Yeah, I don't feel that way. Frankly, I'm not as sick over this as I thought maybe I would be. I'll tell you this. I'd much rather have him gone than a receiver on the team who clearly did not want to be there to the point of this happening the way it happened. Matt saying the Bills haven't been a threat for 2+ years. That's just a flat-out lie. That's a flat-out lie. The Bills were a play away from beating the Kansas City Chiefs last year in the divisional, who wound up going on to win the Super Bowl. That is not true. Haven't been a threat for 2 years. That is just, that's not accurate. Were they not maybe as electric as they were in the 13 second year? Maybe not. Probably not. Results have all wound up being the same. And the results of the winner at the end of the day have all wound up being the same too. All of them. Bills losing the divisional, Chiefs win the Super Bowl. But to say they haven't been a threat is nonsense. They might have looked last year like they weren't a threat. But even when they weren't a threat, even when they were at their perceived lowest they've been under Josh Allen, they find a way to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and still win a fourth consecutive AFC East title and secure the 2 seed. Now, if you're saying they're not a threat in regard to them not being the Chiefs, they're not, but nobody is. Nobody is. And if you're saying that they're taking a step back now because of this situation, yeah, they definitely are. Can they take a step back and take another step forward to replace what's currently happening? That's to be discovered. But in terms of what type of threat they're going to be moving forward, that's going to very much hinge on this upcoming draft. And what was already a very intriguing and interesting draft, to say the least, is now twice as interesting, twice as intriguing, and twice as impactful, I'd say, on this organization. And I'll leave you with this one last time, just because I'm seeing, everybody's saying we're dropping out of this. We're falling down the totem pole here. We're all the way down the list of AFC teams. We're not going to win the AFC East. I mean, the betting markets, once again, they aren't 100% accurate every time, right? But they're a damn good way to get an idea of what the thought process is surrounding this team the way they currently sit. And even with this move, via BetUS, even with this move, the Bills are still your favorite to win the AFC East. The line has only moved a little bit. And if the Dolphins couldn't close it out last year, mind you, Diggs or not, Diggs last year towards the end of the year, he wasn't doing anything impactful on the stat sheet. And the Bills still rattled off 6 of 7 and erased a 3-game deficit to the Dolphins and won the whole thing. They're still the favorite to win the AFC East. They're tied for 5th in terms of Super Bowl odds. I thought it was done last year. I thought it was right after the Broncos game. I thought it was done. Carve it in stone. It's done. And they proved me wrong. Is their work cut out for them? You better believe it. I mean, there's no question about it. Their work's cut out for them, and this is going to be a taller mountain to climb than it's been in the past. I'm not counting them fully out. And this draft will certainly make us lean one way or another as far as how much confidence we have in them. Time will tell. And luckily, we're inching in on it ever so closely as tomorrow marks 3 weeks until the NFL draft. I'm going to try and get back on here with you this week with Rico so we can talk about this together, because as you know, the last time him and I were on together, we talked a lot about wide receiver, and we did not see this coming when we were having that conversation, so we're going to have to revisit it. Once again, Richie with another super chat as we close out. He's saying, Josh about to prove people wrong on Diggs made 17. There's going to be a lot of narratives that are going to be proved one way or the other. That's going to be one of them. I don't think that there's any chance that that gets proven in favor of Diggs. But it's going to be a big year for Allen. He's going to be under more scrutiny than maybe he's been in the past. But we've seen it before. And I'll see you again shortly. Hopefully we'll do something either tomorrow afternoon or Friday afternoon. Rico and I will hop on here and talk more about this. There's going to be plenty more to discuss in terms of this move and how it impacts the draft. And, of course, the draft itself as the weeks move on here. Once again, 3 weeks tomorrow marks the first round of the NFL draft, and it just got a whole hell of a lot more exciting. On your way out, Smash that like button for me if you could. Subscribe if you haven't already so you can stay up to date with all of this craziness that's been happening over at One Bills Drive. And also make sure to check out the link in the description below for BetUS, 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,500 with the code JOIN125. Appreciate all you guys who took time out of your afternoon to come in and tune in for this breaking news. It hit me out of nowhere, as I'm sure it did with you, and I'm glad we got to get together and talk about it in real time. And we'll talk more about it in the coming days. Until then, folks, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We'll talk soon. Much love as always. And as always, go Bills.